Let's call this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard to order on Tuesday, December 7th at 6 p.m. Let's see. This meeting is a hybrid meeting, which means that some or all the public bodies are meeting remotely and some are meeting physically in a previously noticed location where the public body may attend to observe, listen, and participate contemporaneously. At least one member of us is here. Please note that we will strive to provide means for those attending remotely to participate in the public comment period. There may be technical difficulties or reasons that otherwise prevent or interrupt remote public participation. Therefore, it's important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending at the designated physical location as posted in the notice and agenda. If a member of the public or the public body has technical difficulties accessing this meeting remotely, please alert us, and the information that you need for that is on the agenda. All right, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. Would anyone like to lead us this evening?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Sure, I think it would be appropriate to recognize the 80th anniversary. Go
ahead. Say something.
Just today, for those who don't know, today is the 80th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. There are still surviving members that were there at that day. They're well over their hundreds, but this is the 80th anniversary of that, and just a little bit of remembrance of the sacrifices that our sailors gave for Pearl Harbor. Thank you, sir.
Okay, we have nothing before us as the local liquor control board. Order of agenda. Any comments there? Okay, that will bring us to public comment. We'll start with people in the room first. If anyone wants to make a public comment, we ask you to come up to the microphone, state your name, town of residence, and you have 5 minutes with no personal attacks. And Kim, is there anyone online?
No, oh, one hand went up. Yes, Mike Morris. Can I bring Mike over?
Good evening, board. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, lady, very good about Pearl Harbor. It's also my wife's and I 42nd wedding anniversary. The Army gave me before I was off to get married 42 years ago. Best thing that ever happened. But anyways, I just had a couple of quick questions about the Zoom process here. They no longer allow chat, and I don't recall why, but if one was in the audience and wanted to bring up a point of order or something, they wouldn't be able to without the chat. Is there something we could do to have something else, or is it just raise your hand at random if we had a point of order? I mean, I thought the chat was handy to have, and that's the first question. And the second one was on Zoom. Do all of you participating physically there see who's out here watching like myself? Or do you not know how many people are attending and watching? I didn't expect our faces and everything else to be up there, but do you have an idea that there's 10 people in the audience, or there's a list of names? What do you see there?
That it, Mike?
Those are the two questions I have right now, yes.
Sure, thanks. Kim, do you want to go start? Go ahead.
Well, just I'll comment on so when we did the process to allow for hybrid meetings, I was delegated to be the person willing to just monitor the Zoom participants for raised hands so that we could take comments from the audience. I think sometimes some members are logged in on Zoom and some are not. And I can see everyone who is as an attendee or a panelist on my screen. And I'm happy to come. You probably want to comment on the chat.
And then the chat feature, we have that turned off because it's too hard to have two. It's like having two meetings at the same time. So, we can't, if you're monitoring what's going on online with those sideline comments, we wouldn't allow those to be in the room. We wouldn't allow 6 people in the back of the room to be having conversation as we're having the meeting here. So we want people to be able to focus on here. So we have this meeting as by law is in person. And if you want to call in, you could do that and by Zoom. that's how we compromise, because some of those bigger meetings earlier on, it was just like having dueling meetings. And if someone is monitoring, it's usually Kim who's monitoring. If she's monitoring what's going on Zoom, she really can't participate in what's happening in the room. So it just became too confusing. So this way we have one meeting where people can call in. They can either call in if they're not here physically, but it allows us to monitor what's happening.
Okay, so, but during a lot of your discussions, if I was to raise my hand, you probably wouldn't pick up on it in the middle of a discussion if I had a point of order. And I'm not able to do that where I would be if I was live there, correct?
I don't know, Kim, do you see that or not? I'm not sure on that one.
I mean, that's correct. Basically, we've had to just navigate how to operate in a hybrid setting. And typically, you know, we'll have the discussion among the board, and then we invite public comment from in the room on the topic, as you know, and then public comment from the Zoom attendees. So it is not, so chances are not likely that that we would call on a raised hand during the middle of a discussion if it relates to a point of order. That is true.
And as I said, as I've been trying to read each time, sometimes I forget, sorry, but it's important to note that the open meeting law only ensures the public's right to participate and comment at a public meeting by attending. So that's the way the VLTC model, VLCT, sorry, model script for opening a hybrid meeting is. So that's the way it's stated. So I guess if you can listen in, and we try our best to do that, but the way the law, from what I have in front of me here, my understanding is that if you want to comment or participate and be sure that you can do that, you have to be physically attending.
So that, I hear you there, but I guess we could be splitting hairs. I mean, is Ally attending? Any different than I am right now?
Ally's on Zoom.
She's not physically there, neither am I. So I guess we
Right.
could split hairs on that, but okay. I appreciate the explanations.
Well, Ally's a member of the board, so it's a little different from, this is a meeting in the public, not for the public, but she's a member who's here as an elected official. So, that's a little different situation, I think.
Well, I thought I'm attendee too right now because I signed up. That's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Kim, anyone else?
No.
Okay, great. But Dennis, go ahead.
The difference, the board members are panelists.
Yes.
Yeah.
What else? Kim?
Can I just make a quick, I don't know if we're doing select board comments, but I just wanted to mention, as liaison to the design review committee, they just had to change their meeting schedule to a time that doesn't work with my work schedule. And so I'm going to try to keep up with the minutes and then potentially change my work schedule after the holidays. But if anyone else is interested in that committee, I'd be happy to chat about doing a trade or a switch or whatever, but I don't think I'll be able to attend those meetings at least until January or February, the next coming months. So I just wanted to share that.
When are they?
Their new time is going to be, it's 5 o'clock on a Thursday. It's not it's like every 3 or 4 weeks. I have all the dates for the 2022 calendar, but it is on a Thursday at 5 p.m. now. It used to be at 9 a.m.
And they meet once a month, or?
It's pretty much once a month. Like when you look at the calendar, I'm not sure what there's a whole, it's the design review meets, and then there's public hearing stuff, and then planning commission, they're all related. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, someone else? Ally, anything?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just wanted to briefly share with folks. I know the board is aware why I'm zooming in remotely to this meeting. It is unfortunately because I tested positive for COVID-19 recently. So thankfully my symptoms are mild and I'm doing okay. It's probably because I'm, in good health and fully vaccinated, luckily. But yeah, I've always thought that this virus is very, very real, but there's nothing like, having it yourself and feeling it, and also feeling some of that like guilt and that shame a little bit associated with maybe unknowingly passing it on to somebody else to make it even more real. So this is just my personal public service announcement to folks to please get vaccinated if you're not already. Please get your booster shots if you're eligible, and please wear masks in indoor public spaces. And on that front, I think, if I'm not mistaken, us as a board, we might be considering this, the mask mandate again on our December 14th agenda. And if so, I would strongly urge us to do that. I think I would really love to revisit that topic and think it's just in all of our best interests right now to keep each other safe. But anyway, thanks everybody so far who's reached out to give me some well wishes, and yeah.
Great, thanks, Ali. Yes, that's correct. So we are going to revisit the mask ordinance on the 14th, which is next week. As we stated, we want to do what the community wants to do. And we've received a lot of feedback. Things have changed, I think, since the last time we discussed it. So we will have that on the agenda and we'll see where that goes. So thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Dan. I just wanted to say that I got my COVID booster today. So I encourage everyone to get it. And if I feel some of those side effects and keel over, just push me under the desk and carry on.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else? Okay. So let's jump right into the budget review. So this evening we've heard a lot of information already. This is 4 models that we want to kind of narrow down and tell Tracy what we want to do, which direction we want her to focus on, which of these models, and we can adjust them a little bit. But tonight's the night basically for the final questions. We want to be able to give her and then to the departments and the staff what they need to do based on the numbers and the direction that we tell her. So we want to sort of kind of generally finalize things, push it back to the town manager and her staff, as I said, so that they can bring us back next week with something that reflects what we have asked them to do, and they can say what's in and what's out and go from there. But this is sort of the funneling it down, the final process here. So over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Present from the beginning. I'm gonna have some strange boxes coming up. Here we go. All right, everybody. So here we are. Like Dan said, we first started talking about the fiscal year 23 budget. I mean, well, we started really talking about this October 5th. And we've been meeting weekly, either for a regular board meeting or a budget meeting. Since then, it's been a long haul. Thank you all for your stamina. I know that it's been a lot. We did some number crunching, and we have discussed the budget for at least 11 hours, including a 4-hour marathon that we just did 2 weeks ago with Public Works. So if anybody has stamina, it's Public Works in the middle of their plowing season. So what we're going to do tonight is look through where we started, which is the proposed budget that I brought forth to you in October 5th. Just a reminder, that was a cut from the department head budget. So department heads bring it all forth. We put it all in, we do some number crunching, and then, I tweak it a little bit and bring it forth to you in October. You heard from each one of the department heads on theirs. We added a few things, and then we're going to see where we need to go. In terms of expectations, it's Tuesday. We are meeting again next Tuesday, and your board packets get to you. We like to be getting that process started at 9 a.m. on Friday. So as you can imagine, this is going to be a pretty big 48-hour push for the staff in order to get this back to you in time to discuss for the 14th. So that's where we're kind of setting those expectations of just meeting that time to not only input it, but quality control it, quality assure it, double check those numbers along with all the other things that I know all 7 of you know that we get done every day. And I think there's a snowstorm possibly coming. So here, let's go. So these are the assumptions we're gonna land with on the first few slides. There's no changes in the previous social service appropriations. None of us have control over that. The voters have to vote down a social service appropriation for it to fall off the pile. They get the same amount every year. Anybody can petition on for more or petition on for new, but there's nothing that any of us can do to remove or reduce a social service appropriation. We are basing revenue on fiscal years 2019, 2020, and 2021 this year, because 2019 was really the last real year that we had. As we all remember, March of 2020, everything changed and revenue has just been all across the board. So we did take all three of those back, and we assumed the same level of use of unassigned fund balances fiscal year 2022 of 608,120. That was just easier. That's something that going forward, as I begin to get more familiar with our budget process, we can move into earlier, but it was easier to keep everything as steady as we could to deal with all of the different things that were going on. Because I think I've been here about 7 or 8 months when we started this. So here's where we started. This is the proposed general fund operating budget that I brought forth to all of you on October 5th. You'll see it's about 18.580. It was a 5.3% increase over fiscal year 22 total budget. And if you remember, we had some minor tweaks because we were moving so quickly. So these numbers might be slightly different, but the intent is still there. And it was close to $1 million increase over fiscal year 22 budget. At that point, we projected the effect on a $250,000 property to be a $169.25 increase and a new tax payment of $7,058 a year. And one of the things that we did talk about in October is this is the biggest increase in quite some time. Unfortunately, with all of the low increases that have happened since about 2017, 2018, we did have a lot of deferred maintenance, especially in the last 2 fiscal years. It was prudent at the time. We really scaled back. We didn't know what COVID was going to do. I still remember the panic of those first few months of a pandemic, but we're kind of here, and this is what we ended up proposing to all of you. Here's what we ended up adding over the course of our 2 months together. Early on, we provided the Conservation Commission with a verbal assurance from all of you that they would have another $3,000. And I say a verbal assurance because we weren't making motions or anything. The Sister City Committee got another $6,000. When you heard from Fire Chief Cooney about the options for staffing Station 2, you all gave us the guidance of adding 4 new permanent firefighters rather than relying to overtime. That's about an additional $250 to $435 over his bottom line budget. So he had put in for overtime on that. And that was our guess. And this is when we ran the numbers, this is the additional funding for his budget to permanently hire those 4 firefighters. We increased the tree warden by about $5,000. And I've heard a rumor that HCRS is going to petition for appropriation for almost $10,000. Those petitions are not due until January. So we won't know if that actually flies until it shows up at the thing. I want to stop here and just say, if I missed anything when we were talking, please let me know. I was taking notes the whole time, but I think this really does represent any sort of verbal agreement we had to add in over the course of these last few weeks. I'm seeing Kim and Dennis.
Kim was first.
Well, I do have one question before, if this is the appropriate time to talk about other additions that I sent out, but with the amount added for firefighters, is that offset at all by reducing the overtime that's actually in the budget, or is this sort of the net increase of?
My understanding is this is the additional funding we will need. Scott's gonna, anybody watching at home, the fire chief, the interim director of police services, and our public works director are hanging out in the back, and they have all the good nitty gritty.
Certainly.
So basically, this shows the breakdown in the general fund budget. So what's the implication of that?
Yeah, so Scott's letting us know that, we did have overtime in the initial proposed budget. And that's going to reduce some, but it's not going to reduce zero because we do staff fire stations 24/7, 365. So you'll see that the overtime line item, and those are you at home, I'm sorry, you can't see this. The overtime line item for FY draft proposed solely with overtime is about $427,000. In order to hire 4, we would bring that back down to $340,000. $1,000. So that's a reduction of about 84,000. And you'll see a couple other reductions, specifically health insurance. But the net change is an additional 252,000.
Thank you. And then would now be the right time? Or
Do you want to talk through all the options just with what's on the slides and then we can start playing around?
Yeah,
Okay.
I
All
was
right.
waiting for that, but I did have a question on the slide, so thank you for that
Okay.
opportunity.
Good.
I'm good for now. Yeah. Thanks.
Let's go ahead.
Thanks, Scott.
Shall I wait?
Or is it about this one or is it in general?
Well, I guess when I saw this additions to the budget, I felt that there were more things that we've added that didn't make this list. Like, I know I've emailed all of you, pardon our repetitive mentioning of this, but we've got an additional mechanic for the police and fire that was added. We got a IT person. I don't know if I got the term right, but DPW clerk is what I called it. There's an administrative assistant and a couple of Parks and Rec staff as well that are new to this. There's varying reasons on why we might do this, but
Those are all sitting in the 18,508 that you see on your screen right there. Those were the proposed items. So they weren't additions that we've been doing throughout the time. This is stuff that has come out of our discussions that weren't originally in the proposed budget. So this 18,508, that includes those people. That's the proposed general fund operating budget.
I do get that part. I get, you gotta dumb this way down for me, okay? It's just more stuff. It's more staff. It's just more. And as I also put, we had a discussion a few weeks back about the CAP, the Climate Action Plan, and what we're facing for increases due to that, because we're gonna have to possibly buy electric vehicles and such, heat pumps or whatever. And to do that, and at that time, the town manager rightfully said, you know, I don't think I can keep this within 5%, 3%. I mean, it's probably more likely going to be 5%. And so we've added all this staff and we haven't touched the CAP yet. So it's just more stuff, more staff and whatnot. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. I'm concerned about this. So I want to hear more and hear what everybody's on everybody else's mind here.
My perception when we went over this stuff is that these were things that we were proposing to see what it would have for an effect on the budget. We weren't locked in stone on any of these things. So, I mean, when we talk about these additions that you say are here, I don't remember voting yet. Yes, I definitely want these to be in there. So it's a proposal to see the effect on the budget, not the fact that we're going to definitely go with these positions or these things that you added on. Am I correct in my assumption is what you, right perspective is what your assumption is or not?
So my understanding of this is that y'all really, your end game is that shall we propose a budget of blank with blank from unassigned and blank for non-tax revenue. If there is a major program that you don't want us to bring forth, firefighters, sidewalks, whatever, but when it comes down to managing the budget, that's me and the department head. So that's going to be the 10 of us in a room deciding what service cuts we're going to do, what priorities we're going to take as a whole. That's where that separation of duties and that internal controls comes from. So that's their job, is to come back from me and say, what I need for you to do is take a look at X, Y, and Z and bring forth what we're going to do to meet this final number from the board. And then I come forth and say, we've determined what we're going to do. And this is how we're going to meet that. Unfortunately, I'm going to tell you, we've had 2 months together. So if there was something that really wasn't sitting well with you, I'm a little disappointed if that's going to come up on the late end of the game, because we could have been doing that work ahead of time and being able to do that calculation. And I saw a lot of nodding over the past 8 weeks. So, that's a little hard. But if there's something tonight that you want to pull back on, you don't want to do the Queechee main box culvert, you don't want to increase staffing at the fire department, Those are the things that we can go back and look at. Quite honestly, on July 27th, 2022, the fire chief could come to me and say, I've got so much burnout. We either need to brown out Station 2 completely or hire a couple of more. And we might come to the decision that we do have to hire a couple of more because call volume's up and we're losing staff to overtime and brown out. So those are the sort of ways that works, and that we might have to make decisions in the budget to say, we heard you, but in order to maintain services, we do need to do this work internally.
So I completely understand that, but my point, I guess I'd like to make is that the chief has asked for 400 firefighters for $252,000. And if we give $252,000, you can do that what you want after we give it to you, whether you choose to hire 4 new firefighters or whether you go out and buy 100 new nozzles for the fire truck. I understand that. After we approve the budget, that's your choice. My concern is that if we say we're going to have 4 new firefighters, my thought process on that is that if we have 4 new firefighters, they get, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, they get into the union, all right, and then the wages go up and up. If we don't use that money for firefighters, I really don't believe that we're going to be able to do that for $252,000. But also, if we need that, if that proposal is for firefighters for safety, and we let that go through for the taxpayers, and you end up using that for something else, that takes away the element of the safety aspect that we want to push across if we go that route. So there's a concern about if we say we're going to propose for 4 new firefighters and you don't do that, there is a concern there.
Then y'all go across the room to room 2 and have a little chit chat about why I didn't do what I said I was going to do. I mean, that is the tension of all of this. And it's a tension that I have with department directors, and there is a check on that. I mean, you could say, Tracy, where are the firefighters? Or I could bring it forth and say, hey, we had to only hire 2 because, every ambulance broke down and fell off into the river. And so we're only going to hire 2 right now. That's the natural movement of how we all work together. And it does mean that my staff comes to me and says, I know we said we wanted to do X, Y, and Z, but ABC came up. And so I think what we need to do is reappropriate, and we talk it out and we reach conclusion, and then we execute depending on what has changed. And for many of us, we've spent the last 2 years doing this, right? We've spent the last 2 years pivoting left and right as different things come up.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Let's see. I hope I haven't said that I want to just do away with the proposals of any of this, much less the new firefighters. I'm still wondering, but I guess what just keeps troubling me, and like I said earlier, you got to dumb this down for my level here. I think of a town employee, particularly a trained one, as in the fire department, of costing at least $100,000 by the time they get their salaries and so forth, and the benefits and everything. So I looked at the 252, and I have the breakdown here, and I still just don't understand it. But that would tell me that we're adding 400,000 to what we're doing here. And so I don't know that this is not a true cost, but it's not what I imagined was going to happen, because one way or the other, with 4 new professional people, I can imagine that we're going to be adding 100,000 each, 400,000 to what we're doing here. I'm sure I'm missing something, but that's where what I'm looking at there. And the other thing I wanted to say is, I understand what was just presented here and over the last few weeks and whatnot, but I keep in mind that my boss is the taxpayers, the citizens. And so they're holding us to, low increases, and we're, as I mentioned before, with this plan, we're at 5-ish%, And we haven't even talked about the other two things that are probably gonna be coming up soon is the CAP, the Climate Action Plan proposals and what we do to achieve some of those goals. And our CIP, the Capital Improvement Plan. So I just, we're just gonna be spending a lot of money here and I'm struggling with it. And I'll leave it at that for now.
It's nice. Go ahead.
Dennis, I do agree with you that we have to be frugal in this and but in the end, if the taxpayers feel that we didn't do our job, they're gonna vote this down.
I'd hate to see
You
that.
know, and I would too. And you know, I will feel that we didn't do our job. Because that's, you know, so I do appreciate your questions on this and I also go to the fact that you have to remember last year we had an absolutely flat budget and no increase. And so you kind of take that into consideration with this, that it's maybe a little bit more than we normally would do. All that said, I absolutely agree. We've got to question every line item and make sure that if it's not something that you feel comfortable with, that we question it. You know, I joke with you and Kim that I appreciate your questions, and I absolutely do, because it helps me and makes me a better legislator. So
She asked more intelligent questions than I do.
I think it's probably equally as intelligent. So you know, those are the things that we have to look at. And in the end, if our budgets don't pass, we didn't do our job. So I'm somewhat conflicted. And we just have to go, I guess, a little deeper dive.
Yeah, I'm good.
Just a couple things. I think I think of this, particularly this meeting, is sort of our opportunity to officially accept or reject any of these kind of pieces that are still outstanding a little bit. And what makes that even more an important opportunity, in my opinion, is that we know how frustrating it is throughout the year when we say, oh, there's this program or something, we want to do this, but we hear the phrase appropriately, well, it's not budgeted, it's not budgeted. So this is our opportunity to put forth things that we feel strongly about being budgeted, and that then throughout the course of the year, you know, things will happen. And in 2021 and some of 2022, we had a substantial number of unfilled positions. And I think some of that is what has contributed to our very substantial unassigned fund balance. And I think that that is something that we should consider utilizing to an extent that that we are looking at being able to provide service for the town without, you know, with being able to supplement and not have a high increase as we would without it. I mean, I sent a note that I think 10% unassigned fund balance is perfectly appropriate, considering Vermont League of Cities and Towns recommends 5%, and we have between 17 and 19%. So I think this is the time where we consider those things, because throughout the rest of the year, if it is not in the next budget, then we don't have the authority to do something with that. And just in, like, from Tracy's presentation, when we did kick off the budget season, October 5th, there was, I remember previous town managers had in kind of one of these, or even in preliminary budget presentations, we were given kind of a bulleted, this is what you get from this budget, like a summary of the additional things. And Tracy did that in that presentation, which we don't see here. So it's sort of the difference, this additions to the budget is what's not included in our books that we've talked about in the last 2 months. But the things that are included are, she's got it listed here that says, this includes police and fire mechanic, recreational specialist, parks and rec laborer, IT help desk technician, benefits technician, seasonal public works maintenance staff, public works accounting technician, other staffing items. I mean, those are things that are expensive, and we weren't totally flat last year just because of regular salary increases and step increases and things like that. But Tracy also summarized for us in that presentation that the 2022 budget went up $49 per, that was the increase for a $250,000 property. Prior 5550, 4727. So it was all in a very reasonable rate back until 2016 when it was 147 and 2015 when it was 162, which is sort of what we're looking at now. So we had a number of years of around a $50 increase for that price bracket, for that tax bracket. I don't know if that's the right term. But so we've cut pretty flat, and I'm hoping that this year we are able to sort of catch up a little, and maybe with help of some of the unassigned fund balance to level it out. Anyway, sorry for that, Ray. Mike Morris does have his hand up again. Do you want to take it or wait?
I'll just wait a second.
Okay,
So-
Mike, we'll wait.
So I just wanted to say too, I think that, as various community members, various boards come to us with their requests and stuff that we have here, it all sounds good because it's only 2 cents, it's only $6,000, whatever it is. But we, as those people come up, we need to look at things and say, this Conservation Commission, for example, how many people is that serving? Sister City, how many people is that serving? Firefighters, how many is that serving? So each of these things, these various groups that come up, we need to kind of consider that in the back of our head, not just individually, but overall the impact. So we added this, and then we're going to add this, and we're going to add this. And we need to sort of look at like, that's a great thing and I support it, but if it's only serving 3 people or 100 people or 300 people, is that something that we should be spending our money on? That's what we need to look at, I think, overall. And I think that at this point in the budget, that's where it all comes together, where we said, yeah, we like that, we like that, we like that, but can we really do that? And I think it was Hannah a couple of meetings ago when she presented, or Tracy or somebody, inflation has gone up so much. So we're not getting for our $5, we're not getting the same thing we got for $5 last year. So we need to consider that too. And as basically the flat budget we had last year. So really, this budget, if you broke it down over a 2-year period, over a 1-year period, it still falls within a reasonable percentage of increase. But we also want to look at things like it was the voters that voted to do the climate action plan. They want that. So realizing that cost is going to come to them, they wanted the pool. Those things are going to come down the road as expenses for personnel and things that we wanted. So I feel like those are things that previous residents voted, and if new people moved in, that happens. But those things are things that the voters said we really believe in, we really want to happen. So we need to think about our job serving them is to give them what they want. They wanted it, and so there it is. So those have increased some things that have changed the initial budget, and then adding these things back in is another little piece. So let's go back to sort of the presentation, and then we'll take comments from the public, I think, at the end. I think otherwise we might get lost in the weeds before all the information gets presented. Does that make sense to people?
Let's see if Mike just wants to chime in real quick. Yeah,
I think we're going to just wait.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to have
Yeah.
10 people that are going to chime in. I think we need to do the presentation and then sort of feel where we are.
Can I just quickly respond to Kim and you as well? Everything you said is correct, and everything that Kim said is correct. But we also have to remember that this is our one and only time that we have control of the budget. When it leaves us and gets approved by the voters, the town manager and the department heads have free will over what we give them. And if we present to the voters that we're going to have a budget presented to them that lists certain items within it, and we're counting on those budget items being in there, and they don't happen, we have to answer the voters. The town manager doesn't, and the department heads don't have to. So we have to be very careful in that what we present and we're passing off to the town manager is what's going to happen, and for the voters. So yes, what's in there is great, but the things that are also in there we want to have happen for the voters' sake as well.
I mean, I would just
Yeah.
respond. I agree with you. I feel a genuine sense of trust for the town manager and the department heads and the staff that they will do the best with what they have that we present to them. And if they don't, then we have issues with the town manager. So then we address that. And that's how we are accountable to the voters in that way, in my opinion.
And I want to second that. I feel like this is no different than the last 100 or 200 years in the town of Hartford. We present it, goes the proper channels. If that doesn't happen, then we hear why. And if it's something that's out of line, we hold whoever's responsible accountable. But to the best of our knowledge, when we're saying that this money is going to the fire department to get firefighters, unless there's something drastic that happens, everyone here in a public session knows that's what it's slated for. And if it's not slated for it, then someone's going to come back and tell us why that didn't happen. So I don't feel that this year is any different than any other years in history, that when things are presented, if we're going to build a new building or something, and that's where the money's supposed to go, and something else happens, well, we need to know why that didn't happen, and then we act on it accordingly. So I agree with you, but I don't think that's terribly realistic. I think, as Kim said, we need to do the trust in the town manager, which then goes back to the staff. And that's, it doesn't matter if we said no for firefighters, they could take out whatever else they wanted and put those in if you follow that logic. So I think we just need to have that trust there that based in this public session, if that's sort of how we're directing that money, that's the way the money is going to be spent, unless something out of our control happens. So I feel okay about that. I feel like that's the process we've used and that we need to trust them. So, anyway. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
All right, so where we left off, these are the things that we talked about. I did add the HCRS position in there when we get to a couple other slides. These are other things in the queue. I didn't add these in. We were still, the number that you're going to see next was unpalatable to me and the staff that did quality control. So I left these kind of sitting in the parking lot, so to speak. And both of these are high level estimates. We didn't go out for bids and quotes. Life is hard enough for many of these contractors without a bunch of municipalities asking them for bids and quotes right now. Because this is where we ended up with what you saw on slide 4, which is 18.856 and a 6.89% increase over FY22. And you'll see the dollar amount increase is 1.2 and 276 over the initial proposed FY23 budget. So we're taking that 18.5 that we saw on slide 2 or 3 and that 18.856 that we're seeing right here. You'll see the projected effect on a $250,000 property is $218 more this year, and a new tax payment of $7,107. It's funny, that's really unpalatable to me. And then I think $218 for 4 new firefighters, a new cart, a trailer, a mower for your park. It almost seems like a good deal a little bit to have a fully functional public works, police, and fire department, which after meeting with many of the town managers up and down the Connecticut River, their citizens don't have those sort of things. So I am thankful that we have what we have for our residents. And we do what we do for them, because there are a lot of people out there relying on volunteer firefighters and state police and not getting their roads plowed. So this is generally difficult for me to swallow. This is around where my department heads originally brought their budget. We brought it down to 5% increase thereabouts. But I also, there's a lot in there. There's a lot of services in there. We're the big kids now. We're sitting in the top 10 in the state. So I have a lot of conflicts, but I don't like it, which is why I gave you guys the 4 options. We're going to pause on that. We're going to talk about local option tax real quick. Local option tax is a 1% tax on rooms, meals, and alcohol. Last week, we talked about cannabis. Cannabis is not and will not be included in local option as of now. It depends on sales. So we get this quarterly, it processes through finance, but it really depends on those sales. Our balance right now, and we all know that our finance team is right on when it comes to these projections, but they do the best they can. 327,443. It could be higher, it could be lower. We will not know by March. We will not know the answer to this. So we're all in Vegas right now. We're rolling the dice on local option a little bit. And this is what I'm going to propose that we bring forth on local option. I'm going to propose that we push the cemeteries over there, all of which have significant deferred needs, and Hartford and Quechee requested a lot more than they have in the past couple of years. And that we're also going to put 2/3 of the ambulance replacement in. You'll see that 321, it's a little bit lower than that 327. I'm being a little conservative that we possibly don't hit that 327 due to reduced sales. If you're wondering, I was wondering too, if we don't spend all of local option tax, it sits in local option tax and waits for us to spend it. So it doesn't move anywhere else. It literally just sits in that account. And we do have to bring this forth item by item to the voters. So you will see these 5 items in different lines on the ballot. Shall we spend this much on the local option tax for this reason? All right, let's pause on, we're going to end our section on local option taxes and talk a little bit about the unassigned fund. Previous boards wanted to maintain it at about 16 to 18%. I know Kim said 17 to 19, somewhere around there, of general fund operating, which is about 3 months worth of expenditures for Hartford. That varies quite dramatically through the year when we talk about tax payments, but a good litmus test, a good thing to get stuck in your brain is we run about $1 million a month on expenditures. It goes up and down and we get reimbursements. So don't think it always has to even out, but that's a good little thing to keep in our brains. We just recently met that criteria. So we've got that sitting in basically what we could all consider our savings account. VLCT suggests 5%, which is about $930,000. Where we land on the percent to hold in unassigned funds depends on the board's risk tolerance. You can hear from me, you can hear from finance all day long, but this is where the board, this is a board landing spot. And you'll see we have just over 3 million in unassigned funds. You know, when we talk about risk tolerance, you know, Mike and I were just chatting before the meeting that, you know, we're still bearing the brunt of 2010, the first great recession of the modern age. And a lot of that depends on where you were. If you were here in a public building, laying off staff and cutting budgets and handing out 1 pencil to each employee for the first 6 months, you may have a different risk tolerance. You know, for each of you to think about where you land with this might be, do you think that's going to come back? Do you think inflation's going to move out of control? Do you think the economy is going to right itself? I don't have a crystal ball. If I did, I would probably be in the basement of the Fed fixing all of this right now, eating some lovely catered food. I really don't. Every day I read, you know, New York Times, flip through the Wall Street Journal, take a look at the Globe, read the headlines and try to see where it's going. I don't know. I don't know if any of us know what's going to happen. But I also hear you again. I mean, you know, I'm not the only one conflicted tonight. I'm presenting this to you, but you know, there's a lot here to unpack. I also hear you with having $3 million in an unassigned fund balance when we have needs, when you all have spoken up about increased services, when we have internal needs that we need to modernize systems internally. We need to bring staff forth to the modern age and give them the tools to do their jobs in the modern age. I hear those conflicts. So, you know, I'm not resting on one side or the other, and I definitely hear both sides of it. And I know why previously boards wanted that 16 to 18. If we were talking, you know, 11 years ago, our counterparts were sitting here talking about laying off staff, that was probably a really tough part. And I was furloughed as part of the 2010 in the city of Oakland due to budget cuts during that time. So I've sat on the other side and bared the brunt of that. But again, we could come out like daisies and we have some other unassigned funds and we could get some infrastructure money and we could all have a really great party this summer. I don't know. So unassigned fund procedurally, we do not need to specifically ask voters for individual items. We do identify groups of expenditures to provide context during budget and candidates night. So unlike the lot, we don't need to Thank you for this, Kim, because unassigned funds is new to me, coming from a different taxation model. So we just provide context in budget and candidates night, like we're going to take from unassigned funds and this is what we're targeting it for. But the ballot item is going to say approve a budget of blank, including blank from unassigned funds. So we just have to have those numbers and that money moves into the general fund. All right. Here we go. These are our 4 options. Many thanks to all of my staff for allowing me to run into their office and wave my hands and then ask them for their thoughts and then run back out of their offices. And a special thanks to Joe Turner, who is our unofficial numbers quality control person. He's getting used to me running into his office, asking him to check numbers. The following 4 slides provide some options for final budget decision. And to facilitate discussion, we've provided the % increase based on the fiscal year 2022 amount to be raised by taxes. So we really want to talk about what we're putting forth to the voters that's going to impact their property tax budget. You're going to see that little equation down there, total operation budget minus revenue fees for service. So that's your WABA fees, that's your trash fees, that's your, all of those sort of things, minus the unassigned fund balance transfer is the amount to be raised by taxes. Those of you who are hanging out with us in July hear that word a lot. All right, are we ready? Here we go. Gird your loins, kids. Option A, we're going to maintain that initial fiscal year 23 budget, allocate 608,120 from unassigned. That's a 7.25% budget increase from property tax. So just put that 7% number in you. And that's a $169 increase on a $250,000 house. So we're looking at a little over 7,000.
I'm sorry, can I just?
Yeah.
Interject? That's the 18.5.
That's the 18.5. That's the 18.5. Now we're going to go to that 18.8. That's that newer proposed budget. That includes the 4 firefighters. We also tossed in that $10,000 that we think HCRS is going to petition. We allocate the same amount of money from unassigned. We've got now a 9.49% increase to be raised from property taxes and a $218 increase on a $250,000 house. So now we're looking at closer to 7,500, right? We were at about 771. And if we narrow these down, we can go into a spreadsheet and I can dig these down a little bit farther for all of you, but I don't like to have a bunch of text on the screen when we're doing PowerPoints. Option 3, use the newer proposed budget. That's our 18.8. Allocate 884,550 from unassigned. So you're going to see that's the 608 plus all those additional funds. So what we did is we took that 608 that we had kind of sitting there static and we brought forth all of those additions. And you'll see we drop that back down to the 7.52 and the 169 and 25 cents increase. So we basically take that extra change that we brought forth with the firefighters, the 2 committees, and the HCRS and allocate a little bit more to the unassigned fund. This is your go big option. We use the newer proposed option. That's the 18.8. We allocate 1.2 from the unassigned fund. That's all the additions. We're going to drop this back down. We're going to take that 600 and then we're going to take, another 8 on top of it. So we're dropping this tax rate back down lower than any other option. And that's 110 increase on a $250,000 house. So we're now looking at, just around $7,000 total. This next slide says questions, but I'm happy to drive the slides back and forth. And then I can't screen share and then also open files. That really makes Zoom angry, but I do have all the budget presentations and a couple of spreadsheets that I can do to tweak with you all if we want to narrow this down. But I would have to stop sharing and then open that up for you all.
And Mike has his hand. Yeah.
Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested in our unassigned funds we want to use those up or save, because I know we have some projects that may be in the horizon, depending on what we do with Fairview Terrace. And the other thing is, I wanted to ask is, can we, and I don't know that the answer is available tonight, but I'm just curious about all these federal funds that may be coming our way, and what they are and what we might be able to use them for, and how that might change what we're looking at here.
You want me to?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
In terms of Fairview Terrace, you have about $200,000 available for engineering. We're gonna have to bond for that. There's no way that's gonna come out of operating, no matter which option y'all decide. Operating is basically gonna pay for the engineering, and then no matter, and we're gonna talk about this next week. No matter what you decide, a bond will have to happen. So that's kind of an entirely different pot of money.
Okay.
In terms of the federal funds, they continue to change the interim fiscal rule. What I've heard from VLCT and from some of the smaller town managers is they didn't have anything that really qualified. So luckily the Treasury is hearing that from people. If you don't have a lot of infrastructure in your town of 1,000 people, so they're changing that a little bit. But generally, we could apply that to any of the major infrastructure projects that we've talked about that involve water and sewer. So for example, and don't hold me to this, but we've got a major water sewer infrastructure project down on Nut Lane that has been designed, but really needs a funding stream. That's something that we could use. We're hearing down the line that for a lot of these programs, the feds are putting money in if local municipalities are also willing to kick down a little bit. So, there's different programs where like they'll put an influx of cash in, but they're going to expect the town to bring forth some of those. Those continue to change. And I was planning on bringing forth that to you guys after the holiday again, so we could narrow that down. But in terms of the budget, there's nothing really in here that's a major infrastructure capital project that we could use. They might give us a little bit of money for the Queechee box culvert, but I don't know that that's a shoe-in.
So are we still on track to get 2 million?
2.5.
2.5 million. And
It doesn't have to be spent until I believe 2026 or 2027 either.
when will we've gotten 1 million of it, or we're getting it, or?
I don't know exactly how much we've gotten because I don't, I can ask for those sorts of things, but I don't monitor those checking accounts. But it just basically sits in a checking account. The Treasury has given it to the state, who has dumped it down to all of the towns at this point. I had lunch with about 10 or 11 other town managers. Everybody's waiting on it until they get through operating and they get a little bit more clarity again as the allowable activities get tweaked by the Treasury. So we're not behind the 8 ball. We're right with everybody else from Berkshire to Woodstock and up to Thetford.
Perhaps then for next year's budget, that may be more of a factor to weigh in on. We just don't know what we're doing as far as this budget, where that money goes, whether we've got, how much we've got, and what's coming. And I'm baffled and puzzled by this, because when Congressman Welch presented this, it was like, I believe he said you could use it for anything. And I had questions as soon as he made that statement back then. So that seems to be more reality now. But
I think he knew he was running for senator. That's why he said that.
oh, okay.
I wasn't going to say anything about politicians and their promises, but
So guys, I think it's a good idea to wait till it shows up in our fund, to see how much we get and when it shows up before we spend it.
Yeah,
I think is what you're saying, which is good.
Yeah, that's good. I do wish it could be more whenever we get it, and for how much we get. I know people were harmed out of this, like the town was. We gave, what was it, 700,000 or something? What was the cost of the credit card thing that we didn't charge the credit card fee?
For absorbing the invoice cloud fees.
Yeah.
That is not an allowable activity. We
See
keep
that?
poking that one, and it's not, that was out of the goodness of y'all's heart. It's not something that we can recoup. I know.
That, to me, is what that money should go towards. There's things like that we, out of this pandemic disaster here, that to right the ship, all the money that was lost for that. That's what I really thought the intent of it was to help where we got hurt before. And I'm sure there's other things. Enough said at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm wondering if people want to just in their head take a second and look at the 4 options and consider what you think is reasonable, for lack of a better word, for what we could present to voters. You know, we have 2 that have 2 budget plans of the 4 that have a 7.52% increase, one that has a 9.49 and one that has a 5.17. If I'm reading the room correctly, think I'm hearing that the 9.49% budget increase would be too much for residents to tolerate. Is that?
This is B.
This is B. So I'm wondering if we want to maybe take that off the table for now and focus on the other 3. We could certainly come back to it, but I think that's what I'm just trying to sort of direct this, narrow this down a little bit and maybe eliminate an option or 2 if we could, and then have some more discussion about how we tweak whatever it is that we're looking at. So, Kim.
Well, would now be an appropriate time to just go through this list of things that I would like us to discuss and consider. And I do think, I'm glad you asked about the climate action plan. If I'm not my recollection is that we were gonna get the, well, I guess we hired Dana. So we have the sustainability, environmental sustainability coordinator. And that they were gonna help allocate. I mean, like, should there be a number other than 0 in that line for 23?
I can give you a little preview about what Dana's thinking.
Okay.
Is that helpful in terms of the climate action plan? So I know he's coming forth in February. Dana's definitely hit the ground running, managing, just learning a lot of stuff because as some of you remember, we had an energy coordinator. He's now with Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Planning Commission. We won't talk about that, Two Rivers. And we didn't have somebody for a while. So like usual, people were picking up the pieces as they could in their own work. So definitely shout out to Dana. His proposals to me, and he's still tweaking them with the groups that he's talking about, aren't really a big, huge financial push. And he's keeping an eye on both the state climate action plan, which looks to have funding attached to it, and the infrastructure and Build Back Better acts, which also have a big climate action component to it. But he's a big believer, and Dana, I'm sorry if you watch this and I misrepresent, in nudging along. So, you know, his ideas are really kind of one electric vehicle at a time rather than trying to buy everything electric, working on heat pumps in buildings by buildings based on the age of their infrastructure and their need to rebuild it. But not, you know, pulling out an old system just to put a new system in. If the old system's working just fine, we're going to track useful life. When it gets close, you know, we're going to start socking away cash and also looking for those funding opportunities. So that way it's not all our money, some of it's state money. And also getting out into the community for, it sounds kitschy, you know, it's kind of businessy speak, but low effort, high value add ideas around, you know, some of our really amazing residents who are doing this sort of work in their community, and bringing that together. So, you know, I think, of course, you know, if we were planting money trees in the food forest and we could shake it out, I think he would love to do that. But he also knows that these are a lot of big changes for the staff, for you all, for the residents. And so working on that to get buy-in. So, you know, everybody that drives my Leaf says, wow, I didn't realize how nice this car was to drive. So maybe that looks like getting the fire marshal an electric car next, and building that kind of rapport. So that way it feels normal and it doesn't feel like Dana's gonna come take their truck away. So that's his plan, is to just move forth with some of those things slowly but surely. So, you know, a truck is ending useful life in 4 years. Let's start sipping away at some money. So maybe we buy one of those new F-150s that are electric. You know, let's make sure that our buildings have the ability to plug in. We have one plug down at Police and Fire. We don't have one at Public Works. So it's not a huge lift. He wants to kind of ease us all into thinking differently about the way that we live, work, and experience the world.
Okay.
All right, Dana, I owe you a cup of tea if I did that wrong.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. We discussed the tree warden, increasing that budget, and that I don't think was in that additional items list, right?
It was. Yep.
It
Yeah.
was, we were already sitting at 12,500, and I, based on our conversation last week, switched this up to an extra 5, which would bring you up to 17 and a half total.
Great, so sorry, forget that. I know this came up briefly, but the under select board recruitment and training, we had the training at 9,000 for 2022, but down to 3,500 for 2023. Is that because there are funds encumbered that we haven't used, or because there will be less training?
When I got the first department head budget, I kind of took a little bit from each of us, including you all and me. And that was one of the places that I just thought $500 per person means that we wouldn't be going big with training, but it would have enough for if one of you or all of you wanted to take a class through LinkedIn Learning, or, you know, get somebody in to do something light. That's kind of the cost of one good continuing education course for each one of you, plus the VLCT basics for anybody who might be new to the board. So that is kind of, besides that and your salaries, that was kind of the only way for me to say, hey, where can I find a little extra cash to pull back on? If there's something else, we are still trying to, thank you, COVID, for continuing to make travel a pain. We're still trying to get you all Groundswell to come in and do some training, but they're really struggling to get out here, especially with the outbreak. I hear from them, they have small children, and coming to Vermont right now is actually not a very positive thing with our case outbreak. So if there's something else that you all really want, I think that we could talk about that in the spring in terms of encumbering money through that, because I don't think it would be a ton. But you know, I just kind of thought, all right, I got to take from everybody, and it was the only way to take from you guys too.
Well, I think that I guess, like, I feel like a big takeaway, and maybe Joe or Ally or Ann, a big takeaway from the strategic plan, for we didn't include in, was diversity and equity training among the leadership, and including department heads and the select board. And we have yet, aside from the couple of community outreach meetings that we've attended through the school district, we haven't done it. And I recognize that COVID postponed everything. But so if there are funds that were allocated in 2021, 2022 that are encumbered, that will cover us going forward. But I feel like in addition to any VLCT workshops we might do on budgeting or ordinances, or those that are frequently offered, the board is going to need to begin an ongoing DEI training. And I feel like it was a very big priority in the strategic plan on equity and inclusion. So if you tell me that there are funds that are encumbered or are going to be encumbered beyond that 3,500, then I'm fine. If not, I would like to discuss making that go back to whatever the cost of Groundswell and or other.
Groundswell is paid for. It's just trying to get them out, and it really is the COVID thing. They're out in Colorado and traveling, and I get it. I haven't been on a plane in over 2 years. Is hard for them, and it does include you all and department heads, and it's a multi-frame, and it's not. This is me in a different hat. It's not framed as DEI training as much as kind of inclusivity, how to interact with people who are different than you, how to find those segues, how to be conclusive, like how to open yourself up to understanding other people's perspectives and how to deal all of those things. Because and this was interesting, Mary Gannon and I had a great conversation about kind of the lessening power of the phrase DEI, but really digging into what that means the next level down. So that's what they've dug down into, is what does that mean? And doing that work.
We paid them, how much did we pay them?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think it was below your all's threshold, but I had to get 3 quotes. So it was somewhere between 10 and 20 probably.
And does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I'm always, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I'm always a little hesitant to take away from training, to take away from anything to make us better. In Kim's thought processes, the strategic plan is not a one-off. It is a continual process. And for us to not continue that, because if April is that training, that means there's no training for this budget for that. And so I do have a bit of an issue with that. And I just, whether it's for the staff, whether it's for us, training is one thing that I have a problem with us scrimping on. I think to make us better at what we do, to make the staff better at what they do is important. And it's continual. And if we give, not just throw money at it, but have a plan for that, for our staff, for you, for us to get better at what we do, we will service this community better. So I am all for giving more money to training in any way, shape, or form. There you go.
Thanks,
And
Joe.
I think a key factor that we also talked about a little bit was that whatever, I mean, if there is a training that happens before March 2022, that's great for this board, but it could be a completely different group of people here after March 2022. So it's not like that previous training is going to be, applicable going forward. And there's a ton, I have worked with Theodosia and Brian Cook, who are ground school principals, and they're incredible. I'm excited to do it if I have the opportunity to with them. But it isn't a one and done kind of thing. So, just like I've done the VLCT same workshop like 2 or 3 times. And I know a number of board members don't collect on their salary or get reimbursed for trainings and that kind of thing. So there's got to be a little surplus in there that, we don't need to discuss that for privacy reasons, but we don't spend all the money that's allocated in there, I think. Of course, last year where we spent $90,000 recruiting a new town manager, which was worth every penny. That's the only time I know of that we've been over budget. But so anyway, I guess I would like to propose bumping that back to 9,000, which doesn't seem like it is enough to even cover a full.
You want to answer on 9?
And I
those
see
of-
Ally's hand, so
Yeah,
Ally, we're
for
gonna
those
get to in a
of you who
second. I think.
don't know, I have spent decades with a continuing education requirement as in my role as an auditor. For 9,000, we can do some stuff. We can get some stuff. Maybe it wouldn't be a multi-day, but if somebody wanted to, hit up crisis communication, or a couple of you wanted to dig in on budgeting or anything like that, it would really allow people to bring forth a new education, especially with the broadening of online learning. So we're less likely to send people to a conference now and pay for travel and hotel, as much to say, there's something great and it's going to be on your laptop screen for the next 2 days for 6 hours a day. So, yeah. And then I do see you, Ally. Hi, Ally.
So Ally, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. So Tracy, the groundswell contract that's already been paid out, what's the time frame on that? Like how long would we get, trainings with what is contracted so far?
It's been a while since I've looked at it, and delving into this has made it a little fuzzy in my brain, but I believe it's 3 sessions with a spacing for some implementation work. And that's 3 sessions for the board, 3 sessions for department heads. And those are not together because of the separation of duties and independence and y'all's different roles. So it would look like a session, a break to do some implementation work, because really, having sat through hours and hours of training, you really want to sit down and say, what are we going to do with what we just learned? A second session, another break, a third session. And that same pattern is for both the select board and for the department heads.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I think I feel, similarly to Kim and to Joe, just that, again, because we have that really robust strategic plan for equity and inclusion, and that remains a big takeaway for me as well. And to Kim's point about board turnover, and maybe it's such that the training that happens for department heads who were included in that, we hope that our department heads are, staying on longer than 2 or 3 year terms like board members, and so maybe we could, afford to cut down a little bit, just thinking more about board turnover than we might be having with like staff turnover, but still wanting to have, I think, consistent training all around. So if 9,000, feels like a way to continue that in some capacity pretty equitably for everybody, great. But yeah, I think I would similarly be remiss to cut any of those training funds. And so I hope that at the very least we could have the 9,000. I think it's extremely important.
Thanks, Ally.
I don't have a problem with 9,000 going into the training budget, but I have to ask the question, where do you want to see it come out of?
The unassigned fund balance.
So use up the unassigned fund. Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we need to do any kind of, like, for those items up there? Like, I still have a couple more items. Could we kind of just keep this ongoing list, and then, or how do we want to make decisions?
I think I'd like you to present your ideas, get
Okay,
them out on the table, and then we can decide how we add those in, change things, just so, we don't say take that off, but then we want to do this. I think throw
okay,
out everything you have, and then we'll sort of see how that all pans out.
sounds good. Next up is, okay, so what is the current status of the funds that were part of the community wellness coordinator, that some portion, I think you were determining, was going to be allocated toward a community needs assessment?
So
I'm not trying to pressure.
oh
the
no,
timing.
totally. So what we ended up doing is we saw that and we talked about it, and we realized that, finding that person for 48, I think I might be a little wrong on these numbers, but let's go with $48,000 a year was rough. I think we're still looking for a police social worker now that Whitney's gone. And HCRS offered us the opportunity to kind of combo with them and have a part-time peer support advocate. I'm checking in with Rachel tomorrow, actually, I think, for $24,000. And then my idea, and this is a live budget, so we're in a live budget right now, was to, in the spring, what happens in the spring is that finance and I sit down with everybody and say, what are you not done with? What did you actually never get started because the world, work priorities change. And that's when we start encumbering. We say, okay, we're not done here. We still need to work this project and we're going to cross fiscal lines. I think about it as a lot of little rafts that we send across the river from one fiscal year to the other. My idea is that when we hit the spring, we'll have a better idea of kind of what the structure looks like in our police department, get some buy-in from that person who may say, yeah, I'm totally into this and I want to sit in and provide my perspective and hear and be part of this methodology. And we say, great, we have $24,000 left over from that 48 that you all approved for this budget. And we want to use that to do this work. And we do have some options on the table, and I don't think it's going to take near as much that. I think we're looking at more like 7 to 10 for a needs assessment from someone who does this work in police and fire services. So not just someone that comes in and does needs assessment, but understands the 24/7, 365 life of providing first responder services. So that's what I would like to do, is get through this with y'all, get that contract signed. It's sitting in my inbox right now. It came just a few hours ago. Get that process started, and March, April, when we start talking about encumbering, bring that forth and get that started with getting 3 quotes from a couple of the firms, which I believe Scott and or Phil gave me a list of the firms that other colleagues have used to do these sorts of needs assessment, gap assessments in Vermont and New Hampshire.
So I'd like to bring back the idea of the community safety review that I shared, which is a very comprehensive report that was done in Brattleboro. I've had communications with one of the authors of that report, and I know it's been discussed during HCORI, Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion committee meetings, and they actually put forth a recommendation to do a similar report. I'm wondering if the board would be amenable to basically like bolstering the community assessment, needs assessment, to be more of this outreach oriented community safety review. Yes, is that clear what I'm asking for?
I mean, I can't help you with that part, but what I can say in terms of funding is that I have the other half of the community wellness, the 24, that's waiting for me in the spring to have capacity to be able to start that contract work. Because yeah, contracting is great and you have somebody else doing the work, but you still need to contract monitor, and there's still work to be done from paid staff. So, in terms of looking at this budget, we do have that pot of money, and we all can have that conversation about if we want to use more of that pot of money for that work in the spring, rather than add it to FY23. So that is another option for you.
Are you, when you talk about a community safety review for $30,000, are you talking about having a professional company come out and do that community safety review? Is that?
Yeah, so basically a consultant. And I think in earlier discussions, my rationale for introducing this or proposing this was, and in discussions when we had our budget presentations from police and fire, like myself, and I do think a good portion of the community would like to see ultimately a collaborative crisis intervention team of some sort. I've mentioned this group out of the Howard Center, the community outreach team, like basically support first responding mental health, substance abuse specialists that can assist police officers and or, serve in some unarmed capacity toward assisting people in crisis, also just, preventative support issues, things that we talked about, from the inception of the community wellness idea. This has been, just an ongoing goal for me. And I know it is something that is a popular concept as well. And so as an individual, I thought, well, how are we ever going to get to where we are now to something that looks like that? And it's a very long and slow and expensive method to get there. But I feel like with anything else, if we don't have a consultant that presents a recommendations to us about how to go about it, why it would be useful, then I don't see us ever actually getting there. So that's kind of the background of why I feel strongly about proposing something like this.
So because I question when you say this, I see this from where I'm looking at it, the role of a community wellness coordinator to be able to do these kind of things to reach out to the community. I thought about this a lot after I proposed a survey. A community wellness coordinator, if we were to put the money towards that individual and get the skills to be able to serve this community well, that person, I believe, could put out this both a survey of what the people in the town of Hartford are looking for, and also put out a safety review that would meet what you're looking for. So I think that we can get what you're looking for if we get a very qualified person for this wellness coordinator position. And I think that would be giving us so much more beyond that. So I would like to see it wrapped into the money, be wrapped into that versus just a one and done company that goes out there and does just one thing for us. That's my perspective. So you can get much more out of the dollar that you're putting out there than just a one and done thing. And the same way with the survey, more than just a one and done survey to get this year.
And I mostly agree with what you're saying. Can I respond? I'm sorry, Joanne, you have your hand up. But when I participated in one of the early drafts of what we were then calling the Community Wellness Coordinator, which is now Peer Support Advocate. And in that, the way that we envisioned that job description was that it would be sort of a 75%, hands-on working with the community and 25% position of doing needs assessment and developing a program, basically developing a wellness department within the town. But that got kind of scaled back. And so basically, like right now, we're talking about sharing the cost of one position with HCRS. And I don't think, I think that would be asking too much of what the position has been pared down to. If we had the position that was more in line with what we originally proposed, I'd say that was kind of what we had in mind, even when sort of developing the whole concept. But I think now it's been sort of pared down, and I think that that's not something we can ask of this position, in my opinion. And I do think, and I know that there are professionals who do this work and who have done this work that don't have to kind of develop it on their own, but have the skills, the templates, the kind of background to be able to produce it.
Oh, go ahead.
And did you have your hand up, Dennis? Okay,
No,
I didn't want to. I'm curious, Bobby's in the room. I'm curious of your thoughts and feedback on this proposal.
Do you want to come up to the mic, please?
You gotta come to a mic,
Thank you.
Bobby, sorry.
I really think, safety is a community responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. So, I think that a survey of that type definitely could be helpful. there are a lot of people that would probably want to weigh in, and we would probably learn a lot from it. I think how it happens, whether it be, from a company or from the wellness coordinator, I think we would embrace it and support the idea as long as they achieve the goal that we ask them to do and get us the information that we want. I think as an agency, we would certainly partner in the project and help in any way we could.
Thank you.
And
Yeah,
Ally
let's
has
go to
her hand
Ally,
up,
yeah.
and then we have 2 hands up here.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and to your question, Lanny, which I hear you in terms of, is it the peer support advocate that takes on this work, or is it an outside consultant? And to me, I think in a situation like this, an outside consultant would be a smart choice, because we're almost kind of looking at it sort of like an audit, in the sense of, when you have auditors come in, like we've had in terms of our finances, those are folks that are not, town staff. And that's really, that's an explicit choice, because I think what we could find if a peer support advocate who is town staff is asked to take on something like this, which, could bring up critical things and critical feedback about some of our public safety departments, and, strong feelings from the community. I think that's a lot to ask someone who's a town staff to hold. And I think that could put them in a complicated position. The peer support advocate, I think, could certainly be partnering with and be supporting the work of the consultants who might do this community public safety review. But I think in my thinking, that's, I think, the rationale for having outside consultants be taking on this initial work. And again, that is something that we sort of have as a document to refer to keep doing this work, right? Like the strategic plan for equity and inclusion. So it wouldn't just be a one and done. It would be something that could set a really strong foundation for our work throughout the years. And I'm really happy to hear Mr. Corbinger's support of that as well. So I would be really enthusiastic and hopeful that we could budget something like this for sure.
Thanks, Ally. Kim, so who you have on the call?
We have Mike and Becca White.
Okay, let's go Mike and Rebecca.
Can you read Mike over?
Good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, I got to go backtrack a little bit. I just have a couple of questions on the one from, I think probably you'll have to refer this to Chief Cooney. The firefighters benefits and everything else, is that included in the 252,000 first? And secondly was the overtime of, I think he said we have about 159,000 overtime this past year. Isn't that pretty close to being in line with what we've had previous years? That my question's clear?
I think so. Get over to that microphone.
Okay.
I think the base, the difference is that you're looking at considering the presentation I gave during the budget period, Mike, and then what's been proposed in the slides by the town manager. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm one, there was, I think there was a note in a previous, maybe there was a previous one about 100, that you've done about 159,000 in overtime this last year or so. And isn't that pretty much in line with what we've done other years?
The budget line probably for the last 3 years in overtime has about been 275 in the budget line
So for overtime.
for overtime, correct?
So this past year, 159 is lower than normal. Is that correct? That's what I understand.
I'm not sure where the 159 is coming from.
I believe in a previous presentation you did some time ago, and you were asking for the 4 firefighters.
Oh, that was the increase. Yes, I believe you're saying I was proposing, so the first draft that was in the proposed budget for overtime showed an increase of bringing the overtime budget up to $427,183.
Okay,
That was the approach I took in proposing just staffing Station 2 with overtime, no new people, and just the current staffing at the fire
so,
department.
all right,
That's filling every vacancy. That's what it would have cost in overtime.
Okay, now I understand that one. Thank you. And the 252 does include benefits and everything else for the 4 firefighters. It's not
Yeah.
just the salaries.
I did produce this, little sheet I gave the select board members tonight that shows the adjustments to the budget to reflect the 252, 435. And that does include the increase to the salary line of the firefighter budget, holiday pay, overtime, their FICA, health insurance, HRA contributions, the dental plan, workers' comp, retirement, and then accidental death and disability payments. So that does include all of that.
So will there be any additional equipment needed for these 4 firefighters that's not included here?
Typically, you would see that, but in this case, because the fire department's already pulling from reserve to do a structural firefighting gear in that fiscal year, there won't be any need to increase equipment and gear.
That's good to hear. I figured you did your homework on this. Thank you on that one. So that answers those 2 questions. That would be it as far as the firefighters and the fire department goes. Going back to the information given out about estimated tax increase of on a $250,000 home. What was that $7,000 tax include? Is that last year's taxes, school taxes, social appropriations, everything else combined, plus the increase this year? What did that $7,000 or include based on a $250,000 house? Because we still have a school board that's going to be presenting an increase also. So I want to know how that got figured as far as roughly $7,000 taxes on a $250,000 house.
I was just waiting to
Yeah.
make sure we were all done, because that is that holds everything else. I'm just looking at my sheet. That holds everything else steady. So, you know, that would be your tax payment to the town, or that would be your tax payment amount total. You know, we can't control on what the school board's going to do. We had to hold steady on our assumptions across the rate. So this is only the municipal rate.
But that $7,000 included the past school rate.
I'm not really
Must have-
sure.
it
what
must
you're
have.
asking.
It must have.
I'm not really sure what you're asking. I'm sorry.
Well, if you say, all right, if I have a $250,000 house, you say I'm going to go up $169. That $7,000 would be all my taxes for last year, school, town appropriations. That's why I'm asking. That 7,000 is not just municipal taxes.
So, okay, so it looks like members of the board are understanding your question a little bit better, so I'm gonna bounce that back to them,
Okay.
because maybe I'm just not understanding the way it's being phrased.
I understand.
So-
Mike is asking, is this, I believe, if I may, that Mike is asking if this is 700,000. I mean, if this increase is just for municipal taxes or is it for municipal taxes and projected school taxes? Is that correct, Mike?
Yes and no. The presentation said on a $250,000 house, the tax would be with a 5.3% increase, municipal increase, my tax would be $7,058. Now, that must also include the previous school taxes, that 7,000. Otherwise, I'd be paying 10,000.
I think the word previous is what is really, I'm struggling with understanding the phrase previous.
Well,
school
how'd you come up with the $7,000 figure? That's not municipal taxes. 7,000 is not just municipal taxes, what I'm saying. It's more than municipal taxes.
Oh, I see.
I think you're correct, Mike, from what I'm understanding, the way you're asking. I think that figure did include both school and town taxes last year. So
Okay.
this increase is based on that information, just on the town portion without the increase of the school. If I'm
Okay.
hearing you correctly. But I think that previous figure was last year's all-inclusive tax. I think, I'm not positive, but I think so. And that this proposal would be the increase of the town portion to that without whatever the school ends up doing.
Yes, we held everything that we do not have control over steady. So,
Okay,
you know, everything else that we just, we, is the will of other people, we held that completely steady. The only thing that we manipulated was a high-low average estimate on the grand list. And I haven't been playing with that because I'd rather just hit that with the medium average estimate than us promise anything.
I think that clarifies that. Thank you. So I just brought the other, sorry, lost my page here. But now, and you said that the social appropriations, the ones we vote on, the other line items on the ballot, they still have until January, I think, 13th to submit for any additional ones. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, but right now you haven't heard of any additionals, what you said, when you said it's holding steady.
HCRS, I heard, is petitioning for an appropriation of $9,995. I haven't heard that in a little bit. So
we may get some additional there also. Okay.
that is sitting in the additions to the budget. So when you look at that 18, oh my gosh, my slides are moving. When you look at that 18.8, that is including that 9,995 from HCRS. We added that in. Better to be safe than sorry.
Okay. But we could get some surprises. We don't know who's out there petitioning for what.
That's true.
I doubt it'd be any major, but anything. Okay. I guess the last thing is taking unassigned funds. You said VLCT recommended we have a 5% in our savings account unassigned funds. I think it used to be a figure of 10%, which still we have extra. If we take from these funds and use them now to keep taxes down, I've seen this done in previous years. You're not asking to drain us like it was before. How do we replenish this in the future? Or how do we maintain this balance in the future? Do we have to, is there anything in the current budget to add to unassigned funds? Do we just wait till we have some years we didn't spend as much money and tuck it away? What's, you know, I always like having, the way I run my business, the way I run my home, or we run our home, is we keep a certain amount in the savings account for those in case purposes. We need a furnace. The well goes. We got to get it fracked like we did a couple of years ago. I mean, things like that. How are we going to maintain that? Is that anywhere in the budget?
So how the unassigned balance works is at the end of every fiscal year, as we hit about Q3 in the fiscal year, we look at what has been happening in terms of budget to actual. And that's when we go into the encumbrance process. So that's when every department head comes to me and the finance director and says, this is what I wasn't able to finish. And in some cases, this is what I wasn't able to start because we're dealing with a lot of supply chain issues. So, you know, we have had that conversation with staff. I wasn't able to get blank until this period. I would like to make sure that I have this project started. All of those get added up. And as we close down the fiscal year, which takes place basically in the month of July, we take those encumbered funds and we see what is, I'm going to say, left over. From the budgeted amount. We take that leftover amount, we minus out all the encumbered funds, and whatever is left over from that amount becomes the funds that push into the unassigned fund. So that's how that process works. And I think that that's a good moment for all of you. And Ellie, I'm pointing at all of them, but I mean you too, is that's where the unassigned fund balance goes. So how it grows is the board directing down to actually not spend the budgeted amount, or things just going sideways in the town. If we have empty staff, if we're not able to execute on projects, you know, we've seen a lot of that over the last couple of years. And when we take that minus out of the encumbrance, whatever's left over as we're closing the year, that's the money that moves into unassigned funds. And that's when you all get that end of year look from our finance director in the summer, as she usually is talking about that as well. So you usually get a slide on what's moving into unassigned funds. So that's the story on unassigned funds.
Okay, I just know that one year we got it down there. I think we're down to around 500,000, if not a little bit lower, and I think it scared a lot of people, but I was pleased to hear we have roughly $3 million in there, and I also think maybe that's a little bit more than what we need, depending on what happens in the future, what we're bonding, whatever. And I just hope that amount doesn't have an effect on what we're going to get allocated through federal funding and other projects down the road. If they say, well, you got too much savings. I mean, that's so I'm wondering if we don't need to keep an eye on that and understand the benefits of the money coming up in the future here. So, all right, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
That's a question. So Tracy, do you know from last year what the unencumbered funds were that went into unassigned balance?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can take a look, but I might not be able to grab that real quick.
I'm just wondering, like, if we have an average over the last 5 years, if
I-
there's a,
Definitely wouldn't be able to get you an average over the last 5 years. We just don't have the data that way, especially not here on the fly.
okay. Is that something you could get for, just for an idea for another meeting?
Probably.
That would be worthwhile to have it just a ballpark and just strictly a ballpark.
Can we bring Rebecca?
Yeah.
Can you bring Rebecca White?
Hello.
Rebecca,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I speak?
go ahead.
Okay. Seeing nodding heads. Hi, this is Becca White, and I live in White River Junction. Thank you for taking my comment. I don't have a question, but I wanted to raise 2 points. First, a huge thank you to Tracy and the Finance Department. It's extremely refreshing to be given this budget with the options that you presented and what feels like a right-sized budget for the needs of the community. It's easy to present a budget that is much smaller and fiscally conservative and then drain staff and limit services in some ways. So I really appreciate that you've chosen to present this budget and have included some of the really needed things that the community has been asking for in the last few years. So thank you for that. And then the second point I wanted to make was to just agree with Kim's sentiments around the community safety assessment or review. I really feel that if we're going to bring in a new police chief or someone within the department who will be taking on this role, we need to give them essentially what we give our fiscal staff. We need to give them an audit. We need to give them a report that will help them identify where they want to start. And I understand the motivation to move it for a future year or do it when we do have the new police chief. But I highly recommend, if we can, putting it in this fiscal budget and then providing it, if the timing is right, to the new police chief when they're taking on the new role. So those are my 2 comments, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Becca. Good.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Kim, do you have a, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I
You said
just,
something? Yeah,
I have a couple more little things,
Yeah.
but not many more, but what were you gonna ask?
I was gonna see if you were done.
Oh,
I'm
no,
looking, being conscientious of the time.
I know,
So,
I appreciate that. Safety review, so I did want to just revisit that we should have a discussion about parking meters and the potential for a community survey. Oh, and actually, another, I think more significant one is that there isn't any funding allocated for implementation of the strategic plan, even, so I'm referencing this community safety review, which was supported by HCORI, but there's a strategic, and Joe might be able to speak to this more directly, but there is a like a working group within the committee that is specifically dedicated toward implementation of the strategic plan, and they have done this amazing spreadsheet where they've broken things down to different areas from within the plan, including data, outreach, these different categories. And so there are some dollar amounts affiliated with some of that. And one question I had was, the public information officer is something that is a funded is funded a goal or not?
What you see in there is a part-time communications person to do all of those. I think about it as external, so anything that we're gonna push out to the community. And right now it's part-time because again, everybody else's needs were so great that I tried to pull back on my own and see what I could live with and what we could try out for a year and see if it works for us. It's also a position that's in pretty high demand in the area, and so I wasn't sure I could compete with all the big employers on a full-time position just yet.
But so for basically for the Hartford Committee on Racial Equity and Inclusion, which has some short and medium term goals that include things around the establishing the data baseline, critical incident training, there isn't anything, there's nothing in there for HCORI. And I'm just wondering if that is just something that is overlooked or if it's intentional. And I think also want to address kind of in that same sort of topic, the, we discussed this policy on policies that was recommended. And I know there is some work like with the new website and stuff that's being done on that. And I guess I'm curious to know, and I think my takeaway from that, my assessment was that we were in favor of it, we're accepting it, but we know that we might not have the time and the resources to implement it right away. Is that a fair assessment? That when we heard the presentation about from the chair of HCORI about the reasons why the town should have better documentation about policies, basically systems around storage and organization and accountability. I can pull up that presentation if we need to. But I guess these were things that, like, I don't want to get to that, September 2022 and say, oh yeah, we talked about wanting to do that, but it's not in the budget, that phrase that comes up. So I guess I'd like to think about, and Joe, I'd love your input, and Ally certainly too, as liaisons to the committee, of if we are neglecting to do some funding for HCORI.
The only, a couple of things as far as the strategic plan and the budgeting towards that, $9,000, the $9,000 for the training was part of that. The other budget item in that was the $3,000 for skills and messaging, and it kind of comes under the public information. The thing that I'm, I guess, hesitant about is that hasn't been completely flushed out as how that's going to happen, what you mentioned. So I don't know if how that data storage and all that's going to happen. So what I don't think a number was actually put on it or anything like that. So that's why I'm, I guess, a little hesitant to just throw out a number and until we know exactly how it's going to go, what is going to, and maybe that's, our shortcoming in not, flushing out what that system's going to look like. And so I mean, I don't know if Ally has any, because she's worked on this as well, has any input on this. I'm just hesitant to throw out, a number, $4,000 for, I don't even know what that would be, so.
Okay, Kim, I think you sent in that information that you sent to us, that email, was a total number of all the things that were included on that list that you discussed, right? No? Okay, maybe I was imagining it, obviously.
No, because I thought it was likely, I wanted to discuss them and I wasn't proposing as a package, but I said, I think these are some things that we need to discuss. The only other one, I think, I apologize for having so many, but I clearly have a fear of getting to the point where we are ready to do something and we say it's not budgeted. And so the other thing is that I know, and we did discuss this about taking out funds that were previously in the line for the homelessness committee because that committee was no longer active, and we clearly the fate of the current emergency shelter committee is uncertain. But we have a really comprehensive report that was done by the previous committee that did make recommendations that had estimated funding attached to them. Anyway, I just wanted us to also consider, do we want to allocate anything toward those kind of expenses as well? And that, I think, is sort of the end of my list.
Thank you. Okay, so if I'm going to make this sort of throw some ideas out there. I think based on what we've heard, that I think probably a 9.49% increase, which is option B, is way too much for us and probably the public to swallow, is my gut reaction so far from what I've heard. The 7.52% increases might fly, but questionably. That would leave us with option D that's sort of presented here, which is a 5.7% budget increase, where if you think of that over last year, which was sort of a quote unquote 0% increase, and this year that's a little less than 3% each year, which seems to fall within sort of what's normal. I like that idea that where it's not too huge of a number that I think we could hopefully get support for. I'm hearing a lot of support for the additions to the budget. The sheet that was in the packet that was the Conservation Commission, Sister Cities, 4 new firefighters, and the tree warden increase, and the HCRS petition. Piggybacking off of Kim's ideas and Gail's presentation way back from the state, the VLCT suggests we have a 5% unassigned fund balance. I'm thinking that a good sort of use of what we've learned tonight would be to take these additions to the budget and put them into the budget being funded by the unassigned fund balance, which I think would still keep us way over the 5% since we have $3 million in there. And as Mike brought up in his phone call, if that money isn't allocated, it isn't spent in that budget, it goes back into the unassigned fund balance. So it might be a way to sort of boost up the infrastructure and the things that we want to do this year without having a direct tax impact. And yet if those things don't happen for some reason, then it goes back into the unassigned fund balance where it came from. How do people feel about that? Okay.
I mean, I think that the numbers you're talking about, if we're going to add any of these other things that we did just discuss, then it's going to modify that percentage a little bit. I think the only hesitation that I have about I'm supportive of a bump. I mean, the difference between 1.216 million from unassigned fund and what would bring us to about a 10% of a $19 million budget, I rounded up basically and said, okay, 10% of that, if we left 1.9 million in the unassigned fund balance, would only change that number for 1.216 to 1.129. Oh wait.
You want to leave about 1.9 in the unassigned? Is that what
That's
the
what I
math
was
you're doing?
thinking, but that's
1.1.
Right. So that brings it down. So then I guess I would say stick with that, which will bring us a little more exactly to 10% of what the operating budget is, as opposed to.
Are you, Kim, I'm going to do the math for you. Are you asking about what, about 10%?
If we kept 10% in the unassigned fund balance.
My 4th grade teacher said, you will never have a calculator in your pocket. Where did that go?
And while Tracy's doing that calculation, I think that the only hesitation I have is that what does that mean for next year's budget, right? Because a lot of these expenses that we're talking about, some that we're talking about are not ongoing salary. I mean, the firefighters clearly is an ongoing expense that, but in theory, there will be some balance coming out of the unassigned fund balance for next year, but we probably are not going to take 1.2 million out of it every year. That's not going to be practical. Sorry. Anyway, I guess, sorry, that's my thoughts, is that I do think that we have an opportunity. I mean, I've expressed before also, ultimately, we're previous taxpayers that paid the tax that then we put into the unassigned fund balance because we didn't spend it or we overestimated for one reason or another. In theory, those taxpayers should all get checks made out to them payable. I think the amount is not significant enough to justify that in terms of just the increase from one year to the next. But I do think that kind of the next best option is to at least relieve the increase. I mean, they're not all 100% the same taxpayers, right? But I think to reduce the tax burden as much as possible, I support.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to do the math. Hold on.
Here, take a break.
Let's give us like 15 more minutes and see where we're at. Maybe we'll be done.
Good luck.
Because we could spend all night here, you know?
Okay, with that.
Yeah.
So here comes the other shoe. We've talked a great deal about adding things to the budget, but I have some issues with what's been presented to us for this budget that I'd really like to discuss. And I'm not sure when we're going to do that, because there's some things here that I do not agree with. And I'm not sure whether we're prepared to do that tonight or whether we're just going to talk about adding things in or what the plan is here. But
Well, I think we've been discussing this for 2 months. So I mean, now we're in the 11th hour trying to move things forward because we have to have it done by next week. So it's a little late to the table, I think, to bring things that are going to be drastically different. We've got these options based on what we've heard, what we've given to Tracy to come up with 4 options, which is a lot of options to consider, which is great. And looking at kind of these things. I mean, if there's some huge major thing you want to pull back on, we can discuss that. But I think at this point, with every department doing presentations between 1 and 3 hours long over 2 months, I feel like that should have happened. You know,
yeah, I agreed that we had presentations 2 or 3 hours long, but we really didn't get a chance to dive into those presentations to say what we really felt should or should not be included. I don't feel that we spent the time because we wanted to get everything digested at once. We wanted to digest everything that was presented to us for the budget as a whole. And then at that point in time, we, pardon the expression, pick away at things that we feel are necessary. This is just, the budget presentation has always been happening, that it's been presented to the select board, and the select board at that point in time came back with what they felt were changes to be made. And this is just a different process than I've ever seen take place. I mean, when I've sat here for a number of years, even before I was on the board, when I was sitting out there in the audience, and I watched budget presentations, and the budget packet's been presented all the time, is that the department heads have talked to the town manager about what they want, and they've included it in their budget. Then the town manager has gone through and seen what the needs were, the true needs, and presented those and made cuts to the department heads budgets, and none of that's taken place this year. And it's a flat line across from where the department head wanted it to be, where the town manager wants to be. And that on many cases, you see the same numbers that the department heads presented, the town managers presented to us. I'm not saying it's on all of them, but there's many things here that I think that we could cut back on, that we don't need to have as much as we had. I would love to see a presentation from the police, from the fire chief, what 2 firefighters would give us versus 4 firefighters. And I'd like to see the presentation on the other issues that we've had for, in particular, positions within town of Hartford, new hires and increases that I think we need to talk about to make cuts on. I'm fully prepared to, I guess, to do that.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we discussed this stuff in the past, a couple of months has been stated more than once. But we really never took a poll at the end saying, do you want to go with this, or this? We didn't vote on anything. I don't think we took a poll on, do you like this or not that, or is this too much? So, when I go on shopping trips, I can't buy the whole store. I might be able to buy a couple things, being dirt poor, but yeah, I guess I don't feel that we necessarily ironed that out in those meetings. And I know that I asked questions during these and had concerns about the mechanic, like where would the mechanic be? And, so you get the mechanic, but then there's gonna have another mechanic. So I assume that person would have to have all the tools. I was very surprised at the proposal for the new IT person and the price tag for that. I think we were told that was like just shy of 100,000 for that. I know I asked about the DPW clerk with that we had one, and then we have it got turned to finance, and now we're going to send it back to DPW. And I never, for me, that was never really resolved. I mean, it was explanations and so forth. So I'm not sure I spoke about the admin assistant, but I do wonder about that. And the Parks and Rec department gave an incredible presentation on why they're needing, I think it was 2 new staff members. I think that one, the justification was that having trouble keeping part-timers or temporary or something or other. So I look at this list and all we're doing basically is adding things to it. It seems like it's an opportunity to decide if we really have to have all these things. I'll say that it's a lot of money, but the fire chief has presented and why we should have these 4 firefighters, and the cut down on overtime and employee burnout was a selling point for me for that. So it's a lot of money. I think it's a lot of money. Anyways, I definitely in favor of the meters, the survey, but I really wonder if on this, what I'm calling a wish list, that you've heard me say before, how have we gotten along in the past without all these things? We're getting additional, the people that I just mentioned, the staff positions I just mentioned. Do we need all of that right now? That's quite a lot. In addition to, we're buying 4 new firefighters. When the IT person presented, I believe it was stated, Dylan said that current, if there's a ticket, they use a ticket system, that those are responded to within a couple hours. That seemed acceptable to me. If it was 2 weeks, then I say we got a problem. But I didn't, the sales pitch for having the new IT person, I wish we could do all of it, but like I said, when you go shopping, you generally can't buy the whole store. So could we put some of this off to another budget cycle? I don't know. Maybe other board members are just completely comfortable with the whole slate here, but I'm not.
Thanks, Dennis. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. So I had a lot of questions as well. I hear what Lanny and Dennis are saying, but during the presentations, I felt like I received sufficient explanation and justification for the numbers, so I would feel comfortable supporting this. As for the other options here, I would support the option D, where we use 1.2 million of the unassigned funds. Other items, I would not support parking meters or the survey. And I would be fine with the additions to the budget that are listed on the slide. So that's sort of where I am on this.
Okay. Joe?
Just about what Mike said, except the parking meters for me is a way to remedy an issue that we have downtown that we're trying to fix. That's that one, and we didn't really go deep dive into it, but I think they're needed. I know they were kind of voted down before, but and it's not a revenue producer, which I think some people thought. It's more to keep the turnover in cars, and also, if I'm not mistaken, and Hannah, you can speak to this a little bit. There will be a period of time where it'll pay for itself, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it won't be tomorrow, but it'll be over a couple of years.
So the company, pardon me, the company that we had obtained the original quotes from and worked with extensively, Lori and Chief Caston, showed us plenty of case studies where the parking meter system had paid for itself in less than 1 year. It's for the meter infrastructure and software.
Thank you.
Kim, do you want to weigh in? And then before we circle back to people who second time?
I'd just like to comment, Dennis, when we talk about could we defer for a year the IT assistant, I feel like we have deferred for a few years the IT assistant. Leo definitely talked about how valuable Dylan was at the time and what a bargain we were getting. And I think like probably since his first, or definitely by his second year, we probably already were considering the need for an assistant, because even if they're responding within a few hours during a 9-to-5 work week, but not necessarily 24/7, but that means that Dylan might never go on vacation or have days off or sick days or anyway. I just wanted to kind of reframe that a little.
Let's go to Ally and then we'll come back to you, Dennis. Okay?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, I think in terms of, excuse me, in terms of the staff additions and that aspect of the budget, I generally, default to town staff who are doing that work every day and know what their departments need. So, and I think it was Mike who said that he felt like there were sufficient justifications for additional staff that have been presented across the departments, and I would agree with that. So I'm not inclined to suggest any cuts to staff. I think if anything, we want to make sure we have our staffs really well staffed, I suppose, especially when they've been understaffed for so long, and having the budget to support what they need. And in terms of the additions that we've talked about tonight, I did have a little bit of trouble tracking exactly what the additional things we're talking about in addition to what's on the slide. So I guess in terms of where I stand, just as sort of a recap, and folks, please correct me if I'm misrepresenting. So things that are on Tracy's slide: Conservation Commission, Sister City, 4 new firefighters, tree warden increase, the HCRS petition seems to be, we seem to be in agreement about. And then I know personally, I would definitely be in favor of continuing to think about budgeting a community public safety review, as well as that training up to $9,000 for board and department heads. I'm not feeling, just because it's so pricey, and it sounds like we're really kind of, having to make maybe some tough calls. I'm not totally sold on parking meters with that huge expense but I would be supportive of the other items. And I would be supportive of using one not to pay too much into our unassigned fund balance. It seems like we'd be at about 10% still with using a considerable amount of that and then keeping the tax burden low. So I would be in favor of that.
Thanks, Ally. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you again. Yeah, I really liked what Joe said about the meters. It's not necessarily a moneymaker for us. It's to solve the parking issue. I do struggle with the $200,000 fee for that. Yes, that's what the meters are going to be, but I'm sure that when we had that presented to us, I'm not sure I ever really get an answer on how we're going to man this, because I know I asked about this. Seemed like it would have to involve an extra officer or two, but I wouldn't say I don't care, but I do wonder that will come with additional costs. I think that beyond the 200, it very likely could, because I don't think anything was figured for who's going to be tending to the meters. And I'm okay with the proposals for dipping into the unassigned funds, but I do know there's a few things that are in the horizon. We are allocating money towards, because we know the Hartford Village Bridge will be replaced here somewhere in 2024 maybe, or at least start. And so we're throwing money at that account to build up for that, because we know that. And I know there's some other things that will probably need to be visited like that for projects. And so that does make me a slight bit hesitant about draining some or a lot of it, because I know there's things that we may want to save it for too. So just another further thought.
Thank you, Dennis. Well, perfect timing. It's 8:15. So at Lanny's request, we'll do a break for 5 minutes and come back and regroup. Can we tell is Ally back on?
I have my share screen up. So here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, great. You ready, Ally?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Well, hey. So, we are after that exciting 5 minutes. Lots of ideas, questions. Go.
Well, I'd like to try to make a motion and see where we can go from there. And if someone wants to go ahead and second it, they can do that, or tell me to go someplace.
I still have a great deal of discussion about the budget presentation. I don't think I'm ready for any vote tonight, right now, that's for certain.
Well, he wants to make a motion. He has the floor, so we'll see where it goes.
Well, let me do this. I mean, I guess what I don't know if I feel comfortable in the direction that I'm sorry, I'm supposed to remove my mask. If Lenny, you have issues. I'm not sure if I feel completely comfortable, just because I'd like to hear him flush it out before I make this motion. So I'd like to yield the floor and go ahead and make that. I say that because I mean, you know, I'm in full disclosure. I want to learn. I want to know what you got to say, and if you know.
So I'd like to learn a few things by the questions I guess I'm going to ask. I see that we're giving a significant increase to the executive assistant. And I guess I'd like to have some justification from Tracy about why we're seeing such an increase in her salary, and we're adding on a part-time benefits technician. I have a difficult time with increasing Paula's salary plus adding a part-time benefits technician. And I guess I'd like to know what the work is that Paul is doing now that Paul is not doing under the last two administrations.
Can I just say, can you instead of using a name, can you use a position
Right.
instead? And I
My apologies.
No worries. No worries.
Okay, my apologies. The administrative assistant, what the administrative assistant is doing now that she was not doing under the last two administrations. What is the workload justification that she has now that it's requiring us to pay her that much more and to give the addition of a part-time benefits administrator?
First off, thank you for that, Joe, because we do have staff members that also pay property taxes in our residence, and it is kind of distasteful at times to speak about someone's livelihood and ask me to justify how they make their money. The board and the town manager have not significantly increased internal staffing for a number of years. The staff in my office prior to the current staff that I have were not great with data collection and retention, so the records are not the way that I would like them. But I have surveyed department directors, and honestly, we haven't opened up new slots, but we've opened up more people and an increased level of service. That includes the level of service that we ask and the complexity of risk, of liability, of complex workers' comp cases, FMLA cases, and confidential information related to attorney-client privilege work products. That job, once upon a time, was a very different job and was more of an assistant, a calendarer, a party planner, and some light paperwork. We now have 106 to 110 employees, depending on who is on and off boarding, who some of them are out on workers' comp, some of them are out on extended medical leave. We have people who have a variety of complex personnel situations. As towns grow, that's normal. It is normal. The more people you are going to get, the more complex your personnel is going to become. We run 3 live collective bargaining agreements with 3 different departments. Actually, the 3 who are here with us tonight. This role has been doing this work for quite some time. in a way that is compensated unfairly in other communities of our size who perform this work in this role. In addition, we often some of the staffing that you're going to see in there is right sizing of the work that is currently being done by people who have a higher level of knowledge, skills, and experience in other areas. So for example, just so we're not talking about anyone's livelihood and their paycheck and people who are voting on this, let's turn this around and look at a law firm. Sometimes you get the paralegal and they charge them $100 an hour, and sometimes you get the partner and it's $400 an hour. And in order to right size both the expense and the knowledge, skills, and experience, sometimes you don't want the partner doing that work. You want the paralegal doing that work. And so a part-time benefits technician is someone who can make sure that those 106 to 110 people who are getting married, having babies, getting divorced, changing their eye insurance, changing their health insurance, changing how they want to have their retirement taken out, have general questions about their FLSA, their HRA, their high deductible health plan. That person is a part-time position who can be solely focused on making sure that we are providing that internal service to our staff in terms of onboarding, offboarding, and maintaining their benefits. It takes up a significant amount of time to manage the people who even just walk into my office and say, I got married last week. How do I add my spouse to my health care? I had a baby. I'm getting divorced. All of those sorts of things.
I understand that, but I see going back to 2020, we were looking at 67, and then 2021, 72, 2, and 2022, 73, and then we're going up to 105. And we had what I would consider to be extremely competent town managers in the past who were able to utilize their time and the staff's time to do the jobs that were required. And I don't believe that we had that many increase in level of staffing from 2020 to 2020, what we want to do for 2023 to justify that level of increase and add another position. I just don't understand how it is we had town leadership in the past managed to get by with our administrative assistant and still accomplish all the needs that the town had to have. And then we're coming up to $105,000 all of a sudden in this budget. I have a hard time justifying how that's possible that we could have gone from a fully functioning town to what we need now to increase this much. I just don't understand that.
And I believe if anybody's remembering my presentation on October 26th, if you're looking at your hard copy on the 5th, we did have a typo in that. And I neglected to bring my budget book down. So the total amount for salaries, overtime, benefits for myself, a portion of myself, a portion of the administrative assistant, the person who is currently in the role of considered the executive assistant / HR director, the environmental sustainability coordinator, and a part-time benefits technician is 288 plus 84, so 366 total. So that's only, so I did have a typo in the October 5th budget, but
Difference of what from what's in the book?
I'm looking at my presentation from the 26th. So I neglected to bring my book down.
I might be able to help, maybe. I wrote this down, typo, and I put down if this is correct, 9708. A difference of 17,185, if that's right. Does that sound right?
Possibly.
Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. We literally sat here. I sat here over the last 2 months. I literally asked Tracy about the salary increases year over year for some of the employees, right? I mean, that was the point of having 4-hour meetings every week for 2 months. So I'm just a little frustrated that we're spending our time right now doing this. There was plenty of opportunity to do it. There were plenty of questions asked and answered about things like that salary. I just don't, I'm sorry. I don't think this is the best use of our time at this meeting right now. So respectfully, I think we should move on.
I tend to disagree with you because we were not given the opportunity to fully discuss and determine how we wanted to move forward on these different presentations. And like I say, there's not just this position that I'm looking at. I'm also looking at the adding of the person in the Public Works Department, which I question. As Mr. Brown has stated, how do we get along with these people without these people before? I understand that the Public Works Director gave a presentation on why they felt that this would help them out to do their internal tasks better. But we have to ask ourselves, as you stated, I can't remember who it is that stated it, but how is it an actual benefit to the taxpayers, to the town of Hartford? If we've managed to get along without this person so much in the past, yes, it makes work for administrators, for our senior staff in Public Works. But if we've been able to get along without these people in the past, I have to question how much more benefit will the taxpayers of the town of Hartford get from having another administrative assistant there. That's not the only question I have too, is that I still would like to see a presentation from the chief of the fire chief, what 2 new firefighters would give versus 4 from the firefighters. It seems to me like the rest of the board is set on 4 firefighters carte blanche without even discussing the possibility of adding 2 firefighters to get halfway there. And I'd like to see what that possibility is and use some overtime to help cover that. There has to be an easy medium in between here. So I firmly disagree with you, Mike. This is not all talked out. We haven't discussed everything and the options that are available to us. There's still many unanswered questions that I have. I'm going to stop there.
Lanny, I have to respectfully disagree with you. I think that, as we said, over time, we've been 4 months of presentations here, and Hannah and residents have come up to this podium and said, why isn't this being done? Why aren't the weeds being chopped down on the sidewalk? Why aren't these other things happening around town? Because we don't have the staffing. Okay, so the town's residents are asking for those things, and I think that here we are, as I've said before, in the 11th hour, and you're asking questions about things. You know, this is not the first time we've heard about the 4 firefighters. We have email and ways to communicate, but reaching out at this late hour, as we know, as we've talked about laying out the timeline and how this goes on, that we need to have this ready by next week. So I don't really quite think it's fair to make those accusations against town staff members. Saying that they didn't give us what we asked them for. Well, you didn't ask specifically for 2. They wanted us, we asked them to what would it take to maintain the 2nd fire station in Queechee. This is what it takes. They answered our question. So I don't think that's a fair statement. And I'm respectfully disagreeing with you on that. And I think that we'll go to Kim, but I really am looking at the hour, knowing that we have got to do something tonight and direct the town manager so that we have a budget for next year. So I want us to focus on what that needs to look like.
Yeah,
Kim.
I mean, number one, maybe I genuinely do sympathize with where you're at right now, because it is and I don't know if you remember, but at the beginning of the budget cycle, when I said, okay, you guys, this is our time. This is when we have questions, we need to ask them, we need to work on it, because we're going to get to this point. And I think where I have been leading is these things I brought up earlier. It was like, okay, it's now or never. Like, if this is the time to bring these things up that weren't already presented to us. And I also feel like our staff has been underserved and underpaid, and including, many of us witnessed when a group wanted to come before us for one of the grants, the planning grants and CBDG grant, and that the staff expressed genuine concern and alarm because they did not have the capacity to manage more grant proposals, which meant that we were losing opportunity for money to be to be issued to the town because we didn't have the capacity with our employees to be able to manage those grants. And so, granted, that's not the same, but I feel like the idea of can we put this off? I feel like we have put off a lot of desired and now necessary increases for a few years. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hear out your other concerns, Lanny, I do wish that they had come sooner when we were discussing those topics. And that was where every Sunday for the last 2 months, I sat in my office with this budget book and going through whichever department we were going to review so that I could say, I have concerns about this amount and these things. And if the department presenting couldn't justify those expenses to me at that time, that would be the time for me to raise the alert. And then even if tonight, like if you wanted to come to us and say, I move that we reduce this line to this much, this line to this much, or whatever, like, I think we don't have time to go back and forth and request another presentation. This is, and it's hard, it goes by fast. Like I remember the first couple times I went through this process, I was like, oh wait, that's it. Like we have to approve or not this. So anyway, I sympathize, but I think we've had our opportunity.
You're welcome to move a budget, but I will vote no on it because I don't have my questions answered.
That's fine.
So,
All right. I
just have two more very, very general things that I think I brought up quite a while ago, but I just want to reiterate a request for when the final budget, well, I don't know if we're getting another printed copy or the digital copy, whatever the final proposed budget looks like. Could we put the calendar year dates on it?
You emailed me and Gail on this one a little bit ago. Yeah, we're gonna work on that. We have to keep the budget modules stable while we're manipulating
Yep,
it.
that's fine. I'm just asking for, I just don't want it to slip through the cracks. So I'm being a squeaky wheel. I would like calendar years on the budget, and also if possible, and if this is too much of an ask, I'm fine to go without, but if there is a way to include the Public Works Department on the various different categories that encompass, because there are so many.
We're looking onto that too, and I think it's totally doable.
Awesome. And then I don't know if it'll do this anyway, but to take out the phrase as of September on the 2022 approved column. So
Yep, all on Gail's radar.
awesome. Thank you so much. Okay.
And before I make this motion, Tracy, I just have to ask, if I make a motion for a particular option, and can we have what it would be from the unassigned fund with parking meters, a survey, and the training, because that's not in there current. Yep.
I just want to distinguish, I don't know, I think we might be conflating community survey with community safety review. Those are definitely two separate things.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. You're
Okay,
correct.
so, and I don't know if there's support for both or neither or one, but they are two. And basically what I would like to propose is if we are in support of the community safety review, that it does encompass the funds that are currently allocated for the community needs assessment.
So
You guys have got $24,000 live in that bucket in a live budget.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really see you needing a ton more. I could be totally wrong. But that's a good chunk of change. Coming from somebody who used to go do that work, that's a good chunk of change for
Okay.
that work.
And so are we in general agreement that we could do something of more depth like this? Basically, can we change community needs assessment to community safety review along the lines of the Brattleboro final report?
are you trying to make a motion to do we have that in this, or is it? I'm just trying to understand.
I just want to see if there is support for that project. And if there is support for that project, can we use this general needs assessment funds for it?
And correct me if I'm wrong, it was 30,000.
Well, let's say 24, because that's what it's.
We have 24 in a bucket.
Because if we can't
In
use that, then I
FY22.
want to propose putting it into the 23 budget. I guess that's why I'm bringing it up today, is that if there's some reason that we say, no, you can't make that switch. Anyway,
I'm gonna tell you, it's totally within my purview
Okay.
to change the name of it and broaden the scope of, for an RFP that we haven't even written yet.
Okay,
How's that? How's
Thank
that?
you.
And we got 24 in the bucket and we'll see what we can do with that
So I
24.
don't need to include that.
No.
Okay.
sorry, but thank you. I really appreciate that.
I have just one question when we do the motion. Can you move like everything that seems to be in agreement and then move parking meters and community surveys separately afterwards? So I can get a chance to vote on those as distinct from everything else.
Maybe we should do those first.
Well, this is kind of just like a, kind of picking one of these options. Start with this,
Yeah.
fine tune that. And then I think what I'm hearing from both of you guys is you might have some things, and what would it do if we added this or changed that to it? So we'll get with a basic, they can go and run with it and say,
Okay.
if you want to add the parking meters, if you want to subtract this, if you want to add that, there's just a, like 3 or 4 very specific things that are on there, then that is how that will flush out, but it sort of uses this as a template and a guideline to start from, which is
Gotcha.
what they need to move forward.
Is that fair?
Yes, that is easy enough to do if we took one number and we just had a couple of little changes into that number, right?
Okay.
We're going down from 4 and, thank you, Joe Turner, for all of these different percentages and stuff, but it is totally reasonable to bring forth next week 2 slightly different options rather than this kind of big push for all the staff to do that, because that'll get most of the numbers in rather than, and that's just, 3 or 4 lines rather than hundreds of thousands. I mean, y'all are looking at those books. That's how many lines of data we're putting in.
So if I call you to sway you for the parking meter, you're gonna charge me? Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
I move that we use the newer proposed budget allocated for $1,216,194 from the unassigned fund balance. 5.17 budget from property tax increase over fiscal year 2022 budget from property taxes, and $110.50 increase on a $250 home for our budget for FY 2022. Is that?
So basically, you're just being,
Is option D.
Is there a second to sort of use that as the template moving forward for somebody?
Just a second.
Second from Mike. Any other questions or comments?
yes, so if this is passed, if we vote to approve that, then we're going to tweak with a few other things, and we will then need to do another motion that has different.
actual-
This is just guidance to them saying, we like this option, we want, this much from the unassigned fund balance. We want to keep a budget that's about 5.17% increase. In other words, we don't want
But the motion wasn't about 5.17, it was 5.17.
but if we tweak it, it's going to change.
Okay,
So,
but we'll vote on it again.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, sorry, just clarifying.
I know you guys have a live motion, but I am the sun is going to rise and I'm going to write you an agenda memo for a packet that we will see in a week that will be a little bit more streamlined.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. I don't think we have any more questions, so we'll call the comments. So all in favor, say aye.
I think you may want to take roll call, because I'm not sure everybody's going to.
Okay, we can do that too. So we'll just start this in. Kim,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Ally,
Aye.
Lanny,
Nay.
Dennis,
Nay.
nay. So 2 nays, I'm in favor, so 5 in favor and 2 opposed. Okay, anything else?
Can I
Sure.
move to add something?
Yeah.
Okay. Chair, I move that we increase the select board training and recruitment amount from 3,500 to 9,000 total for an additional amount of $5,500.
And is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Dennis.
So I liked some of your ideas. What I had hoped to do was eliminate or cut back some of those other things that I mentioned earlier. Would have allowed more of that in my mind. So I like your ideas. I'm gonna vote nay on it, but it's just because I just think we're getting too top heavy and enough said. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Lenny, go ahead.
I share many of the same sentiments of Mr. Brown. I think that the money is coming from places that we need to keep it. And I think there's other cuts that could be made to utilize that money. So I am as well going to vote nay on that.
Good. What else? Okay, let's do a roll call vote. This time we'll start this end. So Dennis,
Nay.
Lenny,
Nay.
Ally,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Kim,
Aye.
I as well. So we have 2 opposed and 5 in favor. Kim, go ahead.
The other, so I just want to, this is less of a motion, but I went back through some notes about what an appropriate amount would be for policy on policies, some of the work to start. And the group that worked very directly on that suggested it was less about a operating budget amount, but more of approximately 40 hours of time. And so I'm wondering if that is something that you feel staff will be like eligible to work toward in the next fiscal year.
Fiscal year 22, probably not
23.
as much. Fiscal year 23, if this budget passes, yes. And I know that many of us think about 40 hours. That wouldn't be a dedicated Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It would be, as capacity moves in and out, do we have a few hours here? Is it a really busy time of year? Let's push that onto the back burner for a few months. Let's bring it forward. But I think that, when we look at IT infrastructure, we're looking at more IT infrastructure. And when we look at more capacity for these special projects, we're looking at more capacity for special projects.
And because of the discussion we just had about the current funds for needs assessment, I will not personally request community safety review funds. I do, and I guess because it wasn't brought forth from H. Corey, unless Joe, I will leave it to you if you think that we should add funds for strategic plan implementation. I won't.
Not this year.
Okay. Does the motion that Joe made include parking meters, or is that a separate motion? Okay.
It does not include parking meters or the community survey.
Okay. So may I make another motion? I move that we add so the amount that was not, this is not part of my motion. The amount that was not approved by to spend the lot money on was 160,000 in 2020, 2021, 2020. I think we could try 175.
Hannah's probably going on hour 18 of her day in the town of Hartford. She's like, oh, that sounds good.
I mean, I know inflation. We don't have a hard estimate.
I didn't ask for a new quote because I didn't feel it was fair. So that's kind of my best guess.
Well, I'm going to move that we add $175,000 to the budget for parking meters.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second from Lanny. Okay, Dennis?
I am confused on that because I thought when it said on the option D, use newer proposed budget, I took it to mean that did include the meters in the survey.
Too.
I think it was in the queue, right? That slide.
These are currently not included in the next slide's totals. So there you go.
Other things in the queue.
Those were not included on that list of, I think there were 4 or 5 other ones. Yeah.
But when it says, the newer proposed budget just means the things that we added when we voted on
It's right here. This
So
is
it's-
what, this is what this is getting you. These are the things that aren't in it. This is the newer proposed budget. And next time I'll put newer proposed budget.
It's okay. It's okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any other
Can it be
questions?
separate for those meters in the survey?
Yeah,
That is just
yeah.
meters?
Just
Yeah.
meters, but I'm proposing 175,000. Let's see how far that can get us. It might mean it needs to.
May change or something.
But it was, the last request was 160,000, but that was in 2020.
Sir.
Can I?
Sir,
Dennis, go ahead.
I'm just wondering about that proposal. I wouldn't say I'd want meters at any price, but I'd hate to see it somehow approve that money and then it comes up to 200 or something, and then we have to restart the wheel again. So I just wonder about that proposal. Like, could it be up to 200?
You could make a friendly amendment that perhaps could be accepted.
I think we know that it's not gonna be more than 200, so that seems like that could be safe, but I would just hate to jeopardize that because we put a low limit on it that wasn't feasible.
So are you making a friendly amendment or not? To
Please.
200,000. Do you accept that?
Can we say, yeah, well, we have to put in the budget. So yes, I accept the friendly amendment to add 200,000.
Up to.
But with the budget, the line item is gonna be the line item. So when we go to spend it, that's when, like, we have to put 200,000 in the budget in case we have to spend that much.
If it's not spent, it might fall back into the
Yes.
unassigned fund balance. And was you the second, Joe? I forgot. No, Lanny.
No.
Oh, Lanny. So were you, okay, so you okay with the,
I accept that, but I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
So if we can only get 3/4 of what the initial of what we initially wanted for meters, can we still go ahead with that? And then we can, at another budget session, we can add the other quarter. I mean, so I would prefer to have it be stated that, you know, we will get what we can get for meters for $200,000. And then we could add the others as needed. This will give us, in addition to, you know, getting us what we need now, it'll also give a good demonstration to the taxpayers of the town of Hartford, the benefits of having meters to turn over the traffic downtown. So I think it'll be a win-win all the way around.
I just caution that doing it piecemeal will probably cost extra in the end there. So
I think we can get, go ahead, Hannah. Yeah.
So the original proposal that we had was for all of the on-street parking in our downtown area. And we also had a proposal that was suggested by planning and the police department at the time to also meter Prospect Street and all that on-street parking as well. So hopefully with the money allocated, we would at least be able to get the downtown, because that's one nice, you know, connected region that we would be able to monitor and then start to branch out in other areas of town.
Yeah, definitely want to make sure we spend what we need up to $200,000 to get. So thank you.
Yep. Other questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll call the question. I think we'll do a roll call again, just to be sure. So we'll start at Kim's end. Mike,
Nope.
Joe,
Aye.
Ally,
Hi.
Manny,
Aye.
Dennis, aye. Aye as well. So 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Anything else, folks? Kim's like an almost question.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. I mean, if
The only other thing that's sitting on the slide is the community survey. That's up on the screen and my screen and the little screen. And whatever's on Kim's list, but this is the only thing that is on my presentation.
At this point, I'm not going to push for it because I think that the budget's high enough as it is. So I would love to be able to do that because I firmly believe that the only way to improve your services is to collect the voice of the customer. The only way to collect the voice of the customer is through a survey, but unfortunately the budget is not going to allow it. So I'm going to say no.
Anyone else? Any comments? Hey,
double check here, I'm sorry. No hands up on the chat or on the Zoom.
so I guess we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second, Jen?
Template?
It's a consent agenda listed on here. None?
No.
No.
Okay. so-
Okay, so, but don't we need to do another vote with a new calculation of those numbers we just put in?
I think next week, is that correct?
So next week is the official vote. So again, what I heard from you guys is option D, and then I've written down, and we also have Lana writing down, and we get to watch this again if we think we missed anything. The sun is gonna come up tomorrow, and I'm gonna start writing you a formal budget memo with a formal. There's
Chairman, make a
the
motion to
sun will
adjourn.
rise again, I promise you, every day. And those formal motions, will craft that in a way that allows you all to make a formal decision, which then puts the whole town meeting process into the queue, because we need to finalize that warning when we come back from our holiday recess on January 11th. So, this will all work in my department for a couple of days. We'll do the quality control, we'll get it all out, see what happens on the 14th, and then we'll start that process towards the drafting the warning, which is what will come forth for you all in January 11th. So that way we can meet all of those deadlines that we are all required to meet.
Chairman, make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Second by Jill, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you guys.